People doing extraordinary things to help others.
If he didn't do what he did, we would have died.
Heroic acts that have sometimes meant the difference between life and death.
And he was just crying, "Don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me."
Amazing acts of courage.
It was just a natural reaction. This guy needs help.
Captured on dash cams, CCTV, and mobile phones. Incredible stories from the UK.
He put his life at risk just to save me.
And across the world.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
All the people that assisted with my rescues that day are my heroes.
We genuinely owe our lives to him.
Today on Saved on Camera, an off-road motorcyclist hits a rock on a mountain trail.
I knew I was in trouble. I had no idea what was below me. I knew there was a cliff. I knew I was going to fall.
In the UK, the serenity of England's Lake District came to an abrupt end for two climbers when they get into trouble.
He'd hit his head. There was blood everywhere, all over the rock, all over him. You quickly realise that you're on your own. Initially, he didn't know where he was, so it was quite worrying.
A seal is slowly strangling itself on a rope off the coast of the Shetland Isles in the UK.
There was no way it was getting out. The rope was twisted right around its neck.
And in America, a man and his two dogs are trapped when the boat they are on catches fire.
I opened the engine compartment, and at that point, the smoke and big ball of fire just kind of blew back towards me.
An off-road biker in America will go so off-road, he ends up falling off a cliff.
I knew I was in trouble. I had no idea what was below me.
70 feet below him lay a pool of water, and he would try and grab anything to break his fall.
I remember this little pine tree slipping through my hands, and I'm like, this is it. Rick, this is how you're gonna die right here.
Rick Hogg is a 50-year-old motorbike enthusiast from Texas.
My main hobby, I would have to say, is motorcycling. It's really been a part of my life since in my 20s. Just had a lot of motorcycles, whether they were dirt bikes or road bikes. It became just a passion.
And his passion for all things biking took him to the Elk Mountain Range in the Colorado Rockies.
Me and a good group of friends and get together from different parts of the country and really just enjoy the scenic beauty that Colorado offers there.
One of his best friends on the trip is fellow enthusiast Ryan Edward, who he met through biking 20 years ago.
Motorcycles have always been in my life since I was very young. My father got me my first dirt bike at 4.5 years old. Motorcycles is definitely my favorite hobby. Rick and I met through motorcycles, along with several other guys, all based around motorcycles and racing.
The guy's certainly got these crazy skills on a dirt bike, and I think it just comes to him naturally.
And to make the most of their experience, they needed to go off the beaten track to a place called Crystal View.
It's in a very, very scenic yet remote part of Colorado where you don't have cell service for 30 minutes. One section of this that is quite challenging. One site has said it's the most dangerous pass in Colorado. So this is pretty treacherous descent, and then of course the climb back up, where there's this rock shelf, and so you have a lot of these pointed rocks that you have to navigate across. Ryan and I looked at each other and said, hey, let's make a run at it. There was already anxiety thinking about this particular section. 3 other friends that were there with us that decided to not do it. They would just wait for us at the top. Ryan and I were just gonna go down, turn right around and come back up. We'd be right up in a few minutes.
Leaving the rest of their friends behind, Rick and Ryan set off on their challenging route.
Ryan took off. Momentum is very critical, so if the rider in front of you stalls the bike or struggles, that's going to affect your momentum. So you usually space out on the climb up. The downhill, you do that as well, but it's not quite as important because you have gravity keeping that momentum going typically.
Having reached the top of the trail, Rick begins the downward climb, but his natural instinct kicks in, putting him in danger.
My downhill descent was too slow. You know, it's apprehension, you know, this self-preservation just comes in, right? It's like, you know, you need to go faster, but something in your mind goes, hey, if I'm going faster, I'm gonna be in more danger. On a motorcycle, you know, it's key to have your momentum going and really just stick it, and you know, that's kind of where I went wrong that day. I got to what's called head shake on a motorcycle, where the front end gets light and the wheel will kind of bounce back and forth. And when it did this and it bounced to the left, I'm pretty confident that that caused me to hit the throttle. And unfortunately, I was pointed in a direction off of the trail and, of course, off the cliff. I knew I was in trouble. I had no idea what was below me. I knew there was a cliff. I knew I was gonna fall. My kids flashed right into my mind. I have 3 wonderful young kids. The next thing that happened is me scrambling for anything to slow me down. And I remember vividly this little pine tree on the side of the rock. And I remember that slipping through my hands. And I'm like, this is it. Rick, this is how you're gonna die right here.
Rick and his bike end up 70 feet below in a swimming hole, known as the Devil's Punch Bowl, and he's convinced he's about to drown.
The first thing I thought was, you've got to get to the surface. It's unbelievable that you're not dead. I'm sure I was in shock. It's just cold, cold water, but I'm scrambling to get to the surface. I've got all of this gear on. I've got heavy, wet boots, helmet, gloves, goggles. I was thankful to be alive, and so I looked around to try to find a way out, and I was between 2 waterfalls, and so I couldn't go downstream. I would have fallen down this waterfall. I didn't feel comfortable crossing the water because of the current. I was afraid it would take me down, and so I just sat there, and I'm like, you know, right now the best thing to do is be patient.
Unaware of the drama down below, Rick's friend Ryan is waiting for him at the top.
When I got to the top and realized that he had not come within the next couple of minutes, never a bad feeling that something had gone wrong until I walked all the way down. And every corner I would go around, I would expect to see Rick in the motorcycle sitting there waiting for some assistance or pushing the bike to get it over a hard spot. Each corner was kind of a little bit more of a letdown, like maybe there was a problem. I got around the very last corner and could see the bridge at the bottom to where I knew he would be waiting. As soon as I saw that Rick was not there, that is when I got a panic feeling that something was not correct. I moved over to the edge and just started yelling his name. As I'm yelling, I hear a response, and I look over the edge of a cliff and I see Rick standing at the bottom at the water.
He said, "How did you get down there?" And I made this motion like off the cliff and in the water, and his eyes just got big as saucers. And I think that's probably when the reality hit him of, you know, how I got down there.
I expected to see injury, obviously, looking off the cliff of that far, even after getting an answer. I was just elated to see that he was able to move around.
How do I get out of here? Because I had no clue, because all I see is a rock wall. I did know that there was this one rock that was about 8 feet tall, maybe 10, that had some handholds. I thought I could climb out, but I wasn't sure where that was going to take me.
So I walk up and down the edge of the trail, and I can see where people had previously crawled down there, which would have been not a ridiculously hard climb if you were in, you know, hiking boots and shorts and pants and stuff, but in motocross gear and boots and helmets and everything else, it was a much more challenging climb. So I was not real excited to go down to see how to get him out of there, but slid down and got to the point to where we could actually touch hands and know that he could come up the harder part, and realize that it was going to be an option to climb right out of it.
So he came down and met me really at the top of this rock. I climbed out, and then, you know, I'm shaking for sure. He helps me, you know, get up, to where the trail was. Of course, you know, it's 70 feet above or so. And when we got up there, it was just amazing. Yeah, I mean, I hugged him, and, you know, it was good to be alive. And that's when the emotions really hit me of what I could have lost. And how quickly, you know, it can go from just out riding on a beautiful Colorado trail to, you know, you shouldn't be there.
And Rick knows just how lucky he was.
So the amazing thing after going through all of this is the only injury I had was a bruise just above my right elbow, and a little teeny scratch that went along with it. The rest of the riders kind of went into kind of support mode as well, and they were able to find me a ride back into town. But you know, the thing that was so special for me is watching my friends come together, just trying to help me get out of there. Ryan specifically. Every day, the rest of my life, I'm going to consider a gift. I really don't think I should be here. So many things went absolutely right. And when I look at it and go, you know, the momentum I had going off the cliff, while that was bad, it shot me off the trail, I think it was critical to my survival because I was able to clear some of these rocks that were below. I had promised my kids, the lesson learned for me is not to get in high consequence areas. I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I could lose it all. That's my promise to them. We want to go back there. We will walk it and kind of reflect on, you know, the things that have happened. I look forward to doing that.
You going to mug me?
Am I going to mug you?
Is that gorgeous or what, eh?
And I believe I can run a decent marathon.
Thank you very much.
Download Veely now. In the UK, two mountaineers face a life or death situation when their climb goes wrong.
The last thing I remember was feeling uneasy.
I heard him screaming. He was falling directly above me. There was blood everywhere.
And any rescue attempt would also come with its own challenges.
The helicopter disappeared, and then the helicopter came back, and we didn't know what was going on.
I was starting to shiver. I could die of hypothermia.
England's Lake District and its inherent beauty has inspired artists and writers for centuries. And it continues to welcome hundreds of thousands of tourists every year. It's also on the checklist for outdoor adventurers, two of whom travelled there from London.
I've been climbing for about 20 to 30 years. For me, it's the focus that you have. When you're in the middle of a climb, your mind, body, everything is just focused on right now.
I think there's a couple of options for us to get there.
I got interested in climbing to start with. I was about 15 or 16 at college with a friend. We went climbing indoors and then started going on adventures.
The weather's looking fantastic.
The guys met when Rob joined the Surbiton and Kingston Climbing Club, where Paul was already a member. They both share a passion for adventure.
We've both got a similar interest for doing more mountaineering styles, more challenging climbing.
The thing about Rob is you always feel that he's competent, he's safe. He's going to look after you if anything goes wrong.
This would be tested to the limit in a climb that Rob had his sights set on.
Pillar is one of those climbs that we've always wanted to do, or I've always wanted to do. but it's quite awkward in that it's 3 hours of hiking to get there. I sent an email out to the club, and Paul was the only one who responded out of the entire club, so it was a perfect match.
Well, leave for 9.
Leave for 9.
Yeah, leave for 9.
Both knew there may be risks.
It's a bit of a challenge. The weather's got to be good, and not everyone can climb it. You need to trust your climbing partner, and I trust Paul.
And so the scene was set for what should have been a difficult but successful climb. Having travelled up from London the night before, they set off the next morning.
We climb generally in pairs. One of the pair is leading, is going first, and the other is holding the rope. And if that leader falls, he's counting on the belayer to hold the rope to stop them, because you will fall a certain distance and then the rope should catch you.
We expected the climb to take maybe 3 or 4 hours. The route is 5 pitches. A pitch is a section of the climb, so you get to a point where you can stop and secure yourself to the rock.
We had a quick chat about who was going to take the first lead, which fell to myself, and then proceeded to do the climb.
As leader, Paul's job was to climb to the first safe position, secure a protection device that allowed him to clip his rope into, and meant, should he fall, the distance would be minimised.
First 2-3 pitches went really well, and these were the hard pitches. We were feeling pretty good. A really positive mood throughout the climb.
This euphoria was not to last.
But pitch 3 was the crux, and we'd done that.
Then into what was meant to be the easy 2 pitches.
Paul took the lead on pitch 4.
I started up a groove in the rock. I got to the top of that groove, and I was faced with a fairly blank wall.
We sort of felt like he was going off route. He traversed round to the left to get back onto the route. And at that point, I could no longer see him.
No longer in Rob's eye line, Paul knew they were off the beaten path.
There are telltale signs. The rocks or routes which have had a lot of travel will have wear marks in them where people have placed their protection. At this point, there weren't any telltale signs which I was absolutely comfortable with.
Roughly 15 metres below, and no longer able to see his climbing partner, Rob too was starting to feel uncomfortable.
I remember calling up to him to say, I'm pretty convinced it's over to the left. And I think Paul shouted back, I'm committed now. When he said he was committed, I was a little bit nervous.
Paul was less than confident about his next move, but he had committed.
There was a small pocket to my left and a little nubbin on my right and a shallow crack in the middle. I placed some gear protection in the crack, but I wasn't really happy with it. It was very shallow. I didn't feel that it was secure, really, but it was the best I could do. So I was feeling a little bit apprehensive.
I didn't know how much protection he'd put in at that point or how good it was.
But they ignored their gut feeling.
The last things I remember were feeling uneasy about the gear I'd placed.
Maybe 10 seconds later, I heard him screaming. I looked up and he was flying through the air.
Later, battered and bruised, Paul is not in a good way, and things go from bad to worse.
First thing I did was grab the phone, and there was no reception. You quickly realise that you're on your own.
Sandnes in the UK, and a boat races to save the life of a seal that's been caught in a lobster line.
This was a full-grown, very, very aggressive seal.
Because they could take your hand off quite easily.
Don't be careful!
He's been stuck for several hours, is exhausted, frightened, and close to drowning.
Careful, careful!
The Shetland Isles are the most northerly point in the UK, famous for their dramatic scenery, thriving fishing industry and wildlife, both on the land and in the sea. On a fishing trip, Martin Garrick was checking his lobster pots when he came across something strange.
When I came to some of the boys, and one of them disappeared. And then I realised, oh my God, there's a seal tied to it.
Seeing the seal was struggling, he immediately called for help from the SSPCA. And on duty that day was Teresa Leask.
I spoke to Martin and he said he'd seen this seal with this buoy attached to it. It was tangled. He kindly took me out on the boat just to see the rope was twisted right around its neck.
And then she wanted to try and get it in the boat. I said, no, the boat's far too small.
The seal was probably about the same size as me, I would imagine. So, yeah, the seal would have had the strength to capsize the boat with me and Martin in it. We knew that time was pressing. So it was obvious straight away that we needed to get a bigger boat.
Hello?
Teresa's first call was to the local seal experts.
So my first thought was to get Jan and Pete involved. They would know what to do.
To stand a chance of success, it was imperative to find a bigger boat. So they wasted no time in calling round the fishing community for help.
I've had a call about a grey seal pup in trouble.
We spent about at least an hour, maybe more, phoning around everybody we knew to see who might have a boat.
So I rang a friend on the west side. She knew a man with the boat. Sorry to bother you. This is Jan from the Wildlife Sanctuary in Hillswick. We wondered if you could help us. I rang that man. He said he'd do it, so we just headed over there straight away.
With the boat located, Jan and Pete rushed to the harbour to meet up with Teresa and trawler owner Sean Williamson.
So we drove down to the west side, and he was there waiting for us. We met up with Teresa from the SSPCA, and she came on with a wetsuit in tow, and we all steamed off to the place where the seal was.
By now, the seal had been in distress for several hours, and its condition growing more serious by the minute.
When they came back with the bigger boat, then I knew they wouldn't understand where it was. That's when I went back over and showed them where it was.
But being tangled in a long rope and moving around meant finding the seal again wasn't going to be easy.
It must have been at least 20 minutes before we actually caught sight of it. It was coming up to the surface and then disappearing again. Then it would appear somewhere completely differently, so we never knew where it was going to be.
It was trapped. The rope was wrapped around something, and it could come up and get air and go back down again, but it couldn't go more than about 50 yards.
We then had to figure out how on earth we were going to catch it. How do you actually catch a seal when it's going to dive again really quickly?
Teresa had what she thought was a solution to catching the seal, albeit a dangerous one.
We'd struggled to see the rope from the boat, and I thought, well, I would get a better view in the water. It's not the wisest thing to do is to jump in the water with a stressed seal.
It's a bit concerning, just in case the seal got a hold of her, you see. They're great big teeth in them, they'll tear you up in a minute, like.
Teresa, this is not a good idea, but she was determined to do it.
My adrenaline was just pumping just to get this rescue done because I could see it was distress. I didn't know what I was going to get at all. I had to try.
Would Teresa's gamble pay off? Find out later as she risks getting close to this dangerous animal. Meanwhile, two climbers in England's Lake District were nearing the end of their climb.
We were into what was meant to be the easy pitches.
When things started to go wrong.
I was feeling a little bit apprehensive.
The protection device used to secure the lead climber had failed.
I heard him screaming.
And he was falling through the air.
He was upside down, falling directly above me. And I could see around the rope, the protection that he'd put in had come out of the rock.
Paul was right to have been apprehensive. The protection did not hold and he had now fallen, quite severely.
He swung into the rock right next to me, head and shoulder first, clattering into the rock. There was blood everywhere, all over the rock, all over him. I shouted across to him. He didn't really respond. I managed to reach over and grab hold of his harness. I was able to pull him onto the ledge where I was stood. I didn't know what kind of state he would be in because he'd hit his head. First thing I did was grab the phone, and there was no reception. You quickly realise that you're on your own.
Their remote location, something that first attracted the pair to the climb Pillar Rock, was now against them.
My second reaction was then just to shout for help, and luckily someone was in the valley. She had reception and was able to call mountain rescue.
By then, Paul had regained consciousness.
The first thing I do remember after waking up is Rob got his coat off and put it around me in addition to my own, and was basically talking to me and telling me what was happening.
Initially, he didn't know where he was, so he actually thought we'd finished the climb and was somewhere else, so it was quite worrying.
But the fall had resulted in other injuries.
I was having intense pain from my shoulder and from my eye and around my eye. I was just thinking, oh, I'm bleeding, and then trying to wipe it out of my face.
Luckily, by then, help had started to arrive.
We'd been sat on the ledge for probably an hour or so before the helicopter came. I jumped up and waved.
But it wasn't that straightforward.
Then the helicopter disappeared. And then the helicopter came back, and I jumped up and waved again, and the helicopter went away again. It was quite traumatic to see them come and then see them disappear again. The helicopter couldn't get in close enough to winch him directly, and we didn't know what was going on.
Also making his way to the scene was mountain rescue volunteer Martin Pickavance. He'd got the call 20 miles away in the classroom where he teaches.
I knew that it was a casualty with a head injury and serious trauma, so I picked up some bits and bobs of first aid equipment that I had in the back of the vehicle and just headed off.
With only this detail, Martin had to consider the worst.
The fallen climber is on Megatron. I'll get back to you if there's any further information. Over.
Immediately, you're thinking, where is this climber? Is this climber still suspended on the rope halfway up the rock face? Has his partner managed to get him onto a ledge? Have they managed to get him to the bottom of the crag? Has he fallen the full length of the crag and ended up at the bottom? And all those things are tumbling through your head.
Back on Pillar Rock, Paul was conscious that he was deteriorating.
I was starting to shiver, and maybe I was starting to show the first signs of hypothermia. When you're injured in that sort of country, the initial injury isn't necessarily the thing that kills you. You could die of hypothermia.
The rescue team, though, were putting their plan into place.
We put a rope along that scramble so that we could get gear and people onto the top of Low Man. Low Man's at a part of Pillar Mountain, if you like. It's the highest point. It's where the rock climbs stop. So we knew that from the top of Low Man, we could carry out a rescue.
All the while, Rob kept a watch on Paul.
He was kind of huddled in and protecting his arm, so I was looking down the valley and spotting people and just kind of relaying what was going on a little bit to Paul. And the helicopter picked some of the mountain rescue guys up, helicoptered them up to the top of Pillar and dropped them off there.
Once we'd set the rescue rope system up, we were able to lower in our first rescuer. Chris went down to the casualty site.
It was a big relief to see him.
These guys were huddled onto the tiniest little ledge. There was no way that Chris was going to get onto that ledge with them. He managed to get a dressing onto Paul's head, did a quick assessment, and then made a decision at that point that the safest thing for Paul and the quickest way to get him out of that area into hospital was to lower him down.
The overriding feeling I got was, people are looking after me. I'll get through this.
Paul, by this stage, was conscious. They abseiled down to a much bigger ledge called Green Ledge, where we had casualty carers waiting to look after Paul's injuries.
For Rob, it meant relief.
It was great to see him down at the bottom and in good hands. I was very relieved.
Paul's strapped into the stretcher. We've gone into a warm sleeping bag. The winchman came down to us and winched Paul into the helicopter and took him away.
At hospital, the true extent of Paul's injuries were now known.
They confirmed that my shoulder was dislocated and nothing was broken. Then proceeded to tug very heavily on my arm to reset the shoulder, and that was quite painful. I got a bleed on the brain. They had a look at it. It was only about 4 mils at that time. They didn't seem to be too concerned. They said they'd sort of basically monitor me.
But Paul, Rob and Martin know that things could have been a lot worse.
If that gear hadn't have held, he would have fallen much further. And if none of the gear had held, he would have fallen directly onto me and possibly could have pulled us both off the rock.
Just pleased that on the day, everything went in their favour and the team were able to help.
And for Paul, the whole event has given him a new perspective on life.
You really start to understand, once you've been through these life-threatening situations, that life is for living. It is about experiencing life, about actually not holding back, not waiting for tomorrow, doing it today. Tomorrow might not be there.
In America, a retired serviceman finds himself and his 2 dogs trapped on a burning boat.
I was exhausted, out of breath, and I thought if somebody doesn't get to me quickly, this is not going to end favorably.
Mike and Jamie Babbitt from Bremerton in Washington are a match made in heaven.
Jamie and I have been married for 4 years now. We've known each other for 5 years.
We've been glued together since then, and we have a wonderful time. We get along great, and we laugh a lot.
The couple share a passion for life on the sea.
While we were dating, we would just walk around the marina and we would just say, you know, we'd really love to just have a boat to be out on the water.
We saved and bought it about 2 years ago, and we've been living on it. It's been beautiful. Obviously, it's a smaller living compartment than what we were used to, and we have 2 English bulldogs named Hootie and Peril.
The couple and their 2 dogs were enjoying their new life.
It's so peaceful and calming and relaxing, and it's just something special about how you feel while you're on the water.
We moor our boat at the Bremerton Yacht Club in Bremerton, Washington. It's just a beautiful place, and it's like a small family there at our club.
That small family at the yacht club would end up owing so much to Mike.
Jamie had to do some shopping, and I was on the boat with the dogs, and the boat needed to have more fuel put in it, so I was preparing it to take it over to our fuel dock. And I walked back down into the salon again. There was smoke inside the salon. The stairway down into the passageway lifts up so you can go into the engine compartment. So I lifted that up, and at that point the smoke and big ball of fire just kind of blew back towards me. The fire was just too big, too overwhelming.
Mike immediately thought of others.
I can't let my friends and family of the yacht club suffer, so I drove the boat out as quickly as I could with the limited time I had. I set the chain and the anchor so that it would catch and not blow back into the marina.
Having driven the burning boat away from the people on the marina, he now turned his attention to saving himself and the dogs.
There was no time to make any kind of calls. I grabbed the bulldogs and put them on our aft deck and grabbed their life vests and put them on. I grabbed the paddleboard, which was up on top of our boat, and slid it down into the water, and I put Pearl on first. And Hootie kind of somehow knew what was going on, so he just stepped right onto the paddleboard. After about a minute or two, I became really cold. I was exhausted, out of breath, and I thought if somebody doesn't get to me quickly, this is not going to end favorably.
Back at the marina, other boat owners became aware of Mike's plight.
I heard people coming down the dock and they were yelling, "Hey, there's a fire out here. Mike Babbitt's boat's on fire." And that immediately got everybody to kick into gear.
Roy sped out in his dinghy and joined the other club members.
When they pulled me out of the water and into the boat, it was a sigh of relief. I was very winded, out of oxygen, and very cold.
Luckily, by the time we got to shore, the fire department was already there, so they were able to take Mike and lay him down and start assessing the situation.
My throat hurt, which is an indication of smoke inhalation, and I was still extremely cold, and they thought that I might have some slight amount of hypothermia.
By this stage, the boat club had been able to reach Mike's wife, Jamie.
Seeing Jamie's face and embracing each other really kind of made me feel much, much better, and she said, you know, it's just stuff, we can replace it, you and the dogs are fine, and that really gave me a sense of relief.
Jamie then found out just how amazing her husband was that day.
I was just so proud of him for having the state of mind that he did, and just so relieved that he was granted the physical capabilities to be able to do what he did. I think he's done a lot of heroic things.
And the other boat owners were keen to show their appreciation.
After the boat, sinking, I donated a bunch of clothes and shoes like that to Mike, and I know that we started a fund to help the Babbitts out and stuff too.
Mike is all too aware, though, of how bad the situation could have been, and it has changed his mind about his living arrangements.
When I look back on how fast the fire moved, I feel very grateful that it wasn't during the nighttime when we were sleeping. I think that for right now, we've decided we're probably going to live back on land. But boating is still in our future. But I think a home on land is our next step.
Back in the UK, a seal is strangling on a fishing rope and rescuers are trying everything to save it. Local wildlife officer Teresa Leask was determined to reach the seal.
She had a shepherd's crook and she would have hooked it and pulled it in.
Can you get the rope?
But even when she took the staff and tried to do it, the staff just slid down the rope. But she was eyeball to eyeball with the seal.
Yeah, I was a little bit shocked, but it was as well. So yeah, we both sort of turned around at the same point. This was a full-grown, very, very aggressive seal.
So we were all getting a bit concerned as to how we were going to actually manage this.
I said it would be great if we had a grappling hook that we could throw it out, hook the rope and pull. And the guy on board said, I've got one.
The next time the seal appeared, he threw the grappling hook and managed to catch the line.
So the best thing that we could do was to winch it up to the boat and try and cut it free.
It looked horrific at the time, but the main thing was we had really sharp knives ready to cut through those ropes.
Even though the seal was now closer to the boat on the winch, they faced more problems.
It's going to choke if we don't be careful.
This was a large, angry grey seal with very big teeth, and it was snapping, and its head was moving really, fast.
Careful. The adrenaline that was going through me wanted to go and be a bit more hands-on, but it's a wild animal, and it was highly stressed. So I stepped back and let them cut it free.
But freeing the seal meant the crew putting themselves in danger.
There's not just one rope around there, there's a few different bits of rope. And so he cut away and cut away and cut away, and we thought we'd freed it.
They cut some of it and it sort of twirled and dropped, but another piece of rope was still holding it.
Because it was freer at that point, it could move its head even more, so it was even more dangerous, because they could take your hands off quite easily.
Jan and Pete's experience of rescuing seals proved to be vital.
You put a towel over the head, as long as you've got that covered, you can handle a seal. If the head isn't covered, you can get a very dangerous bite.
It was a bit scary, but you don't think about it when you're doing it. You just do it.
He put the towel over and Pete started cutting like crazy to get the other bit off. It dropped into the water and shot off in the other direction.
And the seal came past me doing 100 miles an hour. There was a great big cheer under every boat, like, and you're dancing around them.
Well, we all just started shouting because we were so happy that we'd saved it.
I stayed well back, and as soon as it was free, I was getting on the boat pretty fast.
What a feeling that was, to suddenly see this seal escape and go back and swim off into the wild. It's a fantastic feeling.
And we will always have that memory and knowledge that we worked together and we did it together.
We had kind of a group hug and said, wow, we did it. You know, we couldn't believe it.
So through teamwork and local knowledge, the people of Shetland saved the seal from certain death.
Hi, I'm Martin.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Casualty.
Yeah, Casualty. Good to see you, Paul. I'm Rob.
Yeah,
Hi, Rob
nice to
Martin.
meet you,
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Just a couple of months after their dramatic mountain rescue, Paul and Rob are back in the Lake District to meet 2 of the 20-strong team that saved them.
How you doing then?
My eyes are a bit weird.
Yeah, I can see.
So it looks down here.
Yeah.
Because the nerves are still pinched a little bit from swelling.
So that'll go down and it should...
That's what the doctors think. It'll go down and it'll come back.
Yeah. And did you have a minor bleed as well?
I had a minor head bleed.
Yeah.
So that's when they kept me in for 3 days.
And the arm?
Arm, yeah, the shoulder doesn't work very well. I've got nerve damage.
Yeah.
So the signals are not getting to the muscles.
Yeah.
So I can sort of do that.
I've got some issues that I've got to work through. I've got some functionality issues, if you like, because my arm's not currently working. But prognosis at the moment is should get better.
Paul is well on his way to recovery, but the events that day have left him cautious.
I do question myself because I know that I was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you think, well, why did I proceed? But then...
Yeah, but then how many times have you been in that position?
I've been
Exactly. That's called climbing.
Yeah, I've been there a lot of times and gone through it. At the moment, I don't think I'll change.
No. Good.
I'll be still going out climbing.
Good.
Yeah.
These were 2 guys that were experienced rock climbers that had an accident. There's no fault to be attributed there. For all intents and purposes, could have been one of us. When you get a message that comes through and you know it's a climber that's fallen, everybody in the team's a climber or has been a climber in the past. Yeah. So there's a real empathy there.
For Paul and Rob, though, today is also about saying thank you.
We started doing a bit of fundraising by social media for the team.
That's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Cheers.
It was great to see the mountain rescue guys again and be able to give them something, and great to be able to say thanks.
The mountain rescue teams are just fantastic. They're volunteers. They get no money from the government. They really deserve support, especially from people like myself who require their services, but other people who come out into the wilds of the country.
They're in a really serious position. It's really satisfying to know that we're helping those that need us.
I don't know how you can thank them enough, and I think I will be supporting them through the rest of my life. They're just heroes.
People doing extraordinary things to help others.
If he didn't do what he did, we would have died.
Heroic acts that have sometimes meant the difference between life and death.
And he was just crying, don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me.
Amazing acts of courage.
It was just a natural reaction. This guy needs help.
Captured on dash cams, CCTV, and mobile phones. Incredible stories from the UK.
He put his life at risk just to save me.
And across the world.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
All the people that assisted with my rescues that day are my heroes.
We genuinely owe our lives to him.
Today on Saved on Camera. In Indonesia, an Australian family's vehicle starts to disappear into a sinkhole.
I just yelled to Margie, get out of the car.
Get out and get Sebastian out.
With their 2-year-old strapped in the back, they have only seconds to try and escape.
I said to Michael, you need to get out of the car. You need to get out of the car fast.
In the UK, a teenage boy climbing on a gorge slips and falls, bouncing off the rocks on the way down.
It was obvious straight away that he wasn't okay and that he'd hurt himself.
The rescue services are on the way. But he's lying at the bottom of a remote location, and it's gonna be difficult to get him out.
He could have bled to death, and there would have been little that we could have done for him at that point.
In Western Australia, a manta ray has been injured by fishing gear, making it vulnerable to prey, unless it can be saved quickly.
I knew that she was going to pull away pretty quick once I got hold of him, so I knew there was only one shot at her.
And in the UK, a man loses control of his van after having a stroke on a busy dual carriageway.
We looked through the passenger window and saw him collapsed.
Fellow road users desperately try to stop him from colliding with other vehicles. But can they stop him on time?
But he'd obviously still got his foot on the throttle. He was still running up against the barrier.
A young Australian family lose everything as the ground opens up beneath them.
I just yelled to Margie, get out of the car.
Get out and get Sebastian out. I just jumped and did what he said.
With only seconds to react, will they be able to get toddler Sebastian out in time? The Rule family from Australia are on the adventure of a lifetime.
My wife Margie and my son Sebastian and I are currently travelling through Indonesia on a long-term overland journey from Australia to the UK.
Back home in Australia, we were both marine scientists. We both have PhDs and spent way too many years studying, so we decided we needed a change.
Having left their old lives behind, they jumped in their Jeep and hit the road with a toddler in tow.
Sebastian is just under 2 years old now. He's got a really adventurous spirit, and we have a really good time showing him the world.
They had their beloved vehicle shipped all the way to Indonesia. As well as being their transport, it would also be their home.
Back in December, we left Australia and flew to Timor-Leste. We drove across the border into Indonesia and visited a range of islands through there: Sumba, Flores, Sumbawa, Lombok, Bali, and now we're in Java.
But one fateful day, their lives were to be turned upside down, literally.
We'd been camping up in the mountains outside Yogyakarta, and we were just coming down from there to get some lunch and to pick up our new visas from the immigration.
Their route saw them run into roadworks and more danger than they could ever have imagined.
It was crawling, so we were moving quite slowly. And just to the driver's side of the car, there was a long concrete barricade with a metal fence on top of it that we couldn't see through.
And then all of a sudden the metal and concrete barricade next to the car started shaking.
I just felt a really strange lurch to the side. I just yelled to Margie, get out of the car.
Get out and get Sebastian out. And I didn't even think, I just jumped and did what he said. Jumped out, raced around, grabbed Sebastian out. I was relieved to have Sebastian in my arms.
Margie had managed to save their toddler just in time, but Michael was still in the vehicle.
I felt like I probably shouldn't move, or I might sort of change the weight of the car.
I could see that it was teetering right on the edge and how scary it was. And that was when I raced back and said to Michael, you need to get out of the car, you need to get out of the car fast.
With the ground falling beneath them, they were just seconds away from disaster.
It was about 7 to 10 seconds he had to get out of the car.
Turned around and our car literally fell in the hole.
And theirs wasn't the only vehicle lost in the collapse.
And we could see the truck behind us had gone in and that we were actually people in that truck. It wasn't until then that we sort of realised, wow, we actually got out of there in time.
But the relief of escape soon turned back to panic as reality set in.
It was just utter devastation, watching our whole world in our home just tumble into the hole.
I mean, everything we own, our entire lives are in that car.
And we didn't have our shoes on, we didn't have our phones or our wallets or anything at all. Poor little Sebastian doesn't even have any clean nappies or dummies or anything. It's all inside the car. We're just thinking that this was the end of our trip and that we weren't going to be able to continue.
Luckily for the stranded family, the local community rallied round, recovering their vehicle and providing some much-needed support. And the incident hasn't dampened the spirit of the Rule family.
We're currently waiting for parts to be shipped in and then we can get going again. It'll put us back a couple of months, but yeah, we're going to get back on the road as soon as we can.
Meanwhile, back in the UK, on a day out with friends, a teenage boy has taken a fall from the top of a 30-foot waterfall.
I felt like I was in the air for like hours, just looking down at the rocks coming towards us.
After what seemed like an eternity, he is lying badly injured at the bottom.
It was just a really shocking thing. You just said, you're very lucky to be alive.
As the emergency services rush to the scene, they alert the mountain rescue team to help reach him. But even if they can get to him, the area is so inaccessible, it's going to be hard to get him out.
We were concerned that the helicopter might not be able to winch from the location. There was a sense of urgency to move Harry up the slope so he could be airlifted as soon as possible.
The Weatherhead family live in Stocksfield in the UK and are all lovers of the great outdoors.
It's like what I was saying, man, honestly, it's just, you like to be on the go all the time. You wouldn't have the patience.
Mum Katie and Dad Martin have 3 children, including their youngest, 17-year-old self-confessed daredevil, Harry.
Harry's really fun to be around. He makes us laugh a lot. But he's a typical teenager and he can sometimes be a little bit thoughtless and with little respect for his own safety.
My friends would probably describe us as quite stupid. Maybe, you know, a bit of a local legend, who knows.
When Mum and Dad decided to take a short break, they were worried about what Harry would get up to whilst they were away.
So we'd booked to go away for the night. We were just about to leave the house and the 2 boys were rushing in, gathering their stuff together to go down to the river with their friends because it was a lovely day. And my heart is always in my mouth a little bit when I hear that they're going to the river.
She even asked Harry not to go because we just wanted the night away without having to worry about if they were going to be all right.
A group of 15 of them, including Harry's friend Will, set off for local beauty spot Cramell Lynn.
It's really impressive. You drive through the moors and then you park your car and it feels like you're just in a field. And you walk for about 10 minutes and there's this big gorge. And all of a sudden there's this big pool where there was quite a few people swimming there. And we had barbecues and all sorts.
Sun was shining on the pool. Yeah, it was really nice. About halfway up the waterfall, there was a platform. People were jumping off. I did a few jumps off there, a few flips and that. It was quite easy to jump off. Well, I was getting a bit bored. I'd already jumped off the bottom bit like 3 or 4 times. So I was like, all right, OK, I'm going to climb to the top. And I was already at the top, so I was like, there's only one way down, really.
You had to climb up and get in the river about 10 metres before the actual waterfall. And normally you can walk over dry rocks to the very edge. But because it had rained recently, there was water on those rocks, so the rocks were really slippy.
But that didn't deter Harry in his quest for excitement.
So I had to keep on, like, getting on all fours and, like, crawling across, because otherwise you just would have slipped and probably got dragged away by the water.
Harry was up there, slipping on this slippy rock, and we were all kind of scared for him and worried.
Some people are shouting, do it, do it. And then other people were shouting, "Don't do it."
It went very quiet when he went to step off, and we all had a feeling in our stomachs like something bad was going to happen.
Just as I was about to jump, and I put all my weight on my left foot, just as I did that, like a little wave of water just came over, and it just made the rock slippery. I felt like I was in the air for like hours, just looking down at the rocks coming towards us.
He hit the rock, and there was kind of just silence for a bit.
I remember hitting the rocks, and then I kind of like blacked out a little bit at the bottom. I felt myself waking up at the bottom of the water. I like pulled myself up to the top of the water.
Harry managed to drag himself out of the water and back to his friends. But as the shock wore off, his condition deteriorated.
After about 10 minutes of lying down, I tried to get up, and I just couldn't really move at all.
It was obvious straight away that he wasn't okay and that he'd hurt himself.
Harry was beginning to realise he was in serious trouble, and the pain was becoming unbearable.
It was just getting worse and worse, so that was when I realised maybe I should get some attention.
Worried about Harry's deteriorating condition, his friends decided to call for help, only to find out they couldn't get any reception.
Because it's in a kind of gorge, to get signal to call 999, one of our friends had to climb up towards where the cars were parked and call from there.
As the ambulance and helicopter were scrambled, they also called in the specialists in accessing remote areas, the Mountain Rescue Team, and it was Ian Nixon who got the call.
17-year-old male. We received a message from the North East Ambulance Service alerting us to the fact that a male had fallen from a waterfall.
Looks like trauma injuries.
Obviously, our immediate reaction is you've got somebody who's possibly suffered traumatic injuries, and there was a level of urgency to respond. So within a few minutes, we had 3 blue light response vehicles on the road.
But even with the blue lights, it would take an hour to get there, and all they could do is prepare for what they might face.
We're checking how many members we have available, what skills they have, and given the location in which we knew, you couldn't get vehicle access to it. So we were thinking about what kit we might need, and in particular, what technical rope rescue kit we might require to get the casualty out.
Later, the Mountain Rescue Team have to think fast to get Harry to safety before his condition worsens.
I was conscious that having fallen the height that he had, there was a potential for him to be bleeding internally.
Obviously, there was a sense of urgency in terms of being able to move Harry up the slope so he could be airlifted as soon as possible.
And as we were moving, Harry started to develop worsening pain up in the right-hand side of his upper abdomen.
In Western Australia, a routine trip for tourists turns into a rescue at the bottom of the sea when a diver spots a manta ray in danger.
Now I noticed straight away the gang hook, which is a series of 3 hooks together, pretty much right next to her eye.
It was an injury that could mean certain death for the creature.
When she was feeding, she'd become prey to a large shark.
But saving the manta ray wasn't going to be easy.
I knew that she was going to pull away pretty quick once I got hold of her, so I knew there was only one shot at her.
This is Ningaloo Reef in Western Australia. It's where desert meets sea, and it's home to some of the most diverse marine life in the world. Freediver and wildlife photographer Jake runs a tour here.
I think the best thing about my job is being able to swim and interact with all the megafauna here found in Ningaloo Reef on a daily basis. There's very few places in the world that you can swim with all these things regularly, so I'm very fortunate to have this job.
Guests on Jake's tours are normally groups of tourists, but not on this day.
It was a special day in the fact that we had the Tourism Western Australia team on filming, interacting with manta rays on the Ningaloo coast.
The reef has a residential population of manta rays who feed off the rich nutrients of the local coral. Before any of the boat tours head out, Jake's colleague Justine gives a briefing.
I usually let people know a little bit about the mantis biology to start with, and then we go into the rules of the swim and how the interaction is going to work. We always want to make sure that the impact on the animals is not too big.
With the briefing over, the party was ready to head out in search of the marine life.
Before any other tour boats were out there, we headed out to search for the rays. We happened to come across the ray right near a known cleaning station.
The manta ray was Freckles, a much-loved resident of the reef.
Freckles is what we call a coastal manta ray, one of 2 species of manta. Each individual manta ray has a unique belly pattern underneath with individual spots. She was one of the first manta rays to be named almost 13 or 14 years ago, and it's because she has all freckles all over her body. She's between 3.5 to 4 metres wide, 25 to 30 years old. She's a residential female manta ray here.
Before the group on the boat can enter the water, Jake needed to carry out his usual checks.
I'm generally the first person to head out, just to assess the behaviour and conditions and that, ready for the people to enter. So when I went in, I noticed straight away there was a big line hanging out from underneath her.
Jake needs to investigate, but he also needs to gain the manta's trust.
I didn't rush into it or anything, I just approached nice and slow to see how she would react. She actually stopped and then unrolled her cephalic lobe, which is the flaps on the front.
At that point, Jake made a horrifying discovery.
It was a gang hook, which is a series of 3 hooks together, and the first one was embedded just below her eye, but the other 2 were hanging loose, so they were pretty much right next to her eye, and the fishing line was trailing out the back. And if it got hooked on anything, or when she was feeding, skimming the bottom, she'd become prey to a large shark. If they hadn't got the good eyesight, then they'd probably get eaten quite quickly, without their defence. Being so close to a vulnerable area, I wasn't sure whether we'd be able to get it out or not.
Jake must take his time. He rose to the surface to get colleague Justine to help.
Jake gave me his camera and he went to try and get the hooks out.
The most difficult part was just getting close enough. She was very apprehensive because the hooks were right next to her eye. So we had to keep trying and just going slow and letting her get used to our presence and gain her trust.
There's not many people like him that are so calm and collected in the water and willing to spend the time to make sure that Freckles gained his trust.
We swam with her for probably 15 minutes before we attempted any rescue. After the first attempt, she was a bit apprehensive, but then she clued on to what was happening, then she started to approach us.
Within the first couple of goes, he managed to get close enough to cut the wire trace that was dragging behind her.
Free divers don't use oxygen tanks and can only stay under for several minutes, so Jake needs to keep rising to the surface for more air.
We had to keep trying, just going slow.
I knew Jake was getting closer and closer every time. I was just hoping that he could get the hooks out. I knew that that's what she wanted. She kept swimming right next to him, and it was sort of an indication that she wanted him to get them out.
So I used a pair of pliers because I knew that she was going to pull away pretty quick once I got hold of him. And the last thing I wanted to do was to get hooks in my hand as well.
Armed with the pliers, Jake knew he only had a small window of opportunity.
I knew I was only going to have one attempt because once you grab hold of something like that that's embedded in their body, it was going to be very painful. I knew I had to get a good grip to get them out.
After 30 minutes, Jake was beginning to tire, having made 8 dives to try and help Freckles.
When we went down to attempt, I didn't rush into it.
From Jake's perspective, he just stayed really calm in the water and there was no sudden movements. He didn't want to scare her at all.
He knew he must act. It was now or never.
You could see it was painful because she flinched and pulled away. She was quite startled.
Freckles was now free of all the hooks. And the most important part of her body, her eyes, had been saved.
I felt relieved. I was just grateful that we got it out.
It was a bit sort of overwhelming. She sort of made herself really vulnerable when she let Jake take the hook out.
But what Freckles did next shocked Jake and Justine.
She actually turned and came back over to us and just hovered there for about 15 or 20 seconds.
She just swam around him and stopped in the water, which is something I've never ever witnessed from a manta ray before. There's no way of them communicating or talking, but it feels like she was trying to say thank you.
We sat on the bottom for probably 15, 20 seconds before she slowly moved away.
We were all overcome with emotion. We actually shed a few tears. It was just a really happy ending for us all.
For Jake, though, it was just another day at the office.
At the time, I wasn't thinking much about it, to be honest.
In my eyes, I know Jake's very modest, but in the moment, I think he was a bit of a hero.
And Jake hopes his actions will have a more global reach.
You know, if people see me as a hero and get inspired to help protect the oceans and help protect more wildlife and help change what's happening to the planet, then I'd be happy with that.
And Jake couldn't be happier with how Freckles has recovered from her ordeal.
We actually seen her almost 2 weeks later and she was fine, she was feeding along the coast. So I was just very, very relieved and happy that we got it out and we could help her. She's done so much for our industry here, it's good to give pay back to the ocean, you know.
In the UK, a van driver suffers a stroke behind the wheel on a busy dual carriageway, losing control of his vehicle.
The guy had collapsed at the wheel and was totally unconscious.
Passing drivers try to help, but can they reach him in time before he runs into other traffic?
The van would have veered into the oncoming traffic, which could have been catastrophic.
Russell Douglas works as a lorry driver, a job he's enjoyed for over 20 years.
I'm an HGV driver. And I deliver agricultural machinery around the local area.
His experience and skills are vital in safely handling his lorry, which can weigh up to 44 tonnes fully loaded.
It's predicting what you think the car is going to do beside you. It's preempting what the other person is going to do.
And these skills were to be put to the test when Russell was driving his lorry along the A47 near Dereham in Norfolk.
As I pulled onto the piece of dual carriageway, I just noticed the erratic behaviour of several cars in front of me, all pulling from the fast lane and diving into the near side lane. And then there was this van running up against the central reservation, being shadowed by one other car.
The whole incident was captured on a passing lorry's dash cam. Renato Notariani was the driver of the car alongside the van.
It was extremely busy. It was a Friday afternoon. Myself and my friend Tom were travelling back from a funeral that we attended in Kings Lynn. It was Tom who noticed a van driver who was in front of us, who actually came from the left-hand lane of a dual carriageway and veered across all the way to the right-hand lane and started slowing down. So we thought it was a bit bizarre. What's happened to him up in front? I was driving, so I pulled up beside the van. We looked through the passenger window and saw him collapsed.
The man had suffered a stroke while driving and was now unconscious in the fast-moving vehicle. But these passers-by were determined to at least try and save him.
My initial thoughts were to pull in front of him and try and stop his vehicle with my vehicle. However, when we looked up the lorry in front of us, the driver indicated to us that he was aware of what was going on and he was going to intervene.
Russell had managed to pull alongside the van and had a unique viewpoint to assess the situation more closely.
I could see that the guy had collapsed at the wheel and was totally unconscious, but he'd obviously still got his foot on the throttle. The other two guys in the other car, they were obviously shadowing him. And I thought, well, they need some help in controlling this situation, and I was in the perfect vehicle. You spend so long sat in these vehicles, they become like an extension of your own body. You know exactly where every part of that vehicle is at all times.
Russell's experience and quick thinking saw him try a brave but potentially dangerous move with his lorry.
I undertook, got in front of him, and then was just kept watching him in the mirror. He was still running up against the barrier, then just nipped him up against the barrier. Just a tiny little manoeuvre, sort of his van, the barrier and my trailer all came in contact at the same speed, at the same time, and just then put the brakes on and brought him to a stop.
Tom had jumped out the passenger side of my vehicle while I was still rolling and ran over to the van. I must admit, it was extremely clever. You couldn't have got him in a better place because the bed of the lorry was exactly the correct size as such to bring the van to a stop. What Russell did was amazing, absolutely amazing.
The only problem was, once we got him to a stop, the van is then trapped between the barrier and the trailer, and we can't get the doors open.
With time now critical following his stroke, will the men be able to reach the driver to get him the medical help he needs? Earlier, teenager Harry fell from a 30-foot waterfall and was left lying waiting for help. But being in a remote location meant any rescue attempt would take time.
We were all down by the pool and we looked up and saw the first paramedics coming down.
Finally, after an hour, the rescue services managed to reach Harry, including the doctor from the Northumberland National Park Rescue Team, Philip O'Donnell.
As I approached Harry, I could see that he was quite pale. I could see that he was awake and looking around, which was reassuring. So I was concerned about the right side of his chest. He was obviously in quite an amount of pain and was struggling to take a good deep breath. I was conscious that having fallen the height that he had, there was a potential for him to be bleeding internally.
Meanwhile, 15 miles away, Harry's mum and dad had just arrived at their hotel break and were starting to relax, unaware of any problems.
We sat in the beer garden, we had a couple of drinks, and life was feeling really good.
And Katie was just starting to get a bit worried because she didn't have any phone signal, so she wanted to go back up to our room just to see, to make sure that she hadn't had any messages.
Straight away, pinged up with 3 missed calls from one of Harry's friends who would never normally ring me. So I just, like, my stomach just kind of lurched because I thought, oh, something's happened at the river.
Worried and fearful of what might have happened, Katie immediately called back.
And she was asking me if he was okay. But none of us really knew.
I think the friend was quite panicked actually himself and just not wanting to make us more panicky about the situation.
But Dad Martin, a doctor, was starting to get worried now too.
I mean, I think he was trying to reassure us by just saying he's awake, he's talking, and he's on the stretcher now. But of course, that lack of detail just frightens you even more.
At the waterfall, they had done all they could for Harry on the ground, and it was now critical to get him to hospital. Quickly.
So I was conscious that a helicopter was coming because it was time critical to get Harry to the hospital.
But as the helicopter couldn't winch Harry out from where he lay, the team would need to use their climbing expertise to get Harry up the steep slope.
Obviously, there was a sense of urgency in terms of being able to move Harry up the slope so he could be airlifted as soon as possible. So moving the stretcher up the slope involved around about 8 team members. So the team members are walking up the slope as the rope's being taken in.
And as we were moving, Harry started to develop worsening pain up in the right-hand side of his upper abdomen. I felt that that might be a sign that there was bleeding in or around his liver. He could have bled to death effectively, and there would have been little that we could have done for him at that point.
About an hour's passed now. The winchman's down by the stretcher, and we've got a couple of team members who are going to use a system called a high line. Essentially, that stops the stretcher from spinning as it's lifted into the helicopter.
Yeah, I was just thinking this might be a bit worse than I was thinking.
As Harry was rushed to hospital, his parents wanted to get there to meet him.
We'd rung 111 to find out what was happening, and they said that they'd booked a heliport at the RVI in Newcastle. So as soon as we knew he was going to go to the RVI, then we could actually do something.
We phoned, and the receptionist said that she could just hear him landing in the helicopter then. But she told us that there was a full trauma team waiting. We thought, why do they think he needs a full trauma team there?
Should we go this way? Yeah.
Harry's father was getting even more concerned.
You're terrified that there's going to be a life-changing injury, you know, a serious head injury or a spinal injury. So you can't really say anything out loud because they're just... you know, it's just...
You all right?
As they arrived at the hospital, they rushed in looking for news of their son.
Yeah, well, when they took us through to the relatives' room, you really think that something awful's happened.
A nurse came out and she said, look, the doctor, he can't find any really serious issues. There's no internal bleeding, no spinal damage, looks like no brain damage, because we didn't actually realise that he had hit his head in the fall.
Even though the news was good, they still had to wait 2 long hours before they could see him.
It seemed a long time to wait, but then when we went through to see him, and yeah, it was the same old Harry with a smile on his face.
He was just acting as though nothing had happened.
A natural teenager, like the first question he asked, where's my phone? Which we didn't have. We didn't have for him. It was with one of his friends, so he borrowed mine just to quickly get in touch with some of the friends that had been there that day, just to reassure them that he was okay.
Said he'd got a broken wrist, but other than that, he was just about okay. And that's when we kind of, all relaxed a bit.
After a few days in hospital, eventually they realised it was just my wrist that had actual damage on the bone. The shoulder and hip was just sort of muscle damage, soft tissue damage.
I don't think anybody could believe it, like the doctors at the hospital, the people that helped him on the day. No one could believe that he was lucky enough to escape that with just essentially a broken wrist.
I think I was just really lucky with the way I fell on the rocks, really. I think that's all it comes down to.
I mean, so many people have more minor falls and get far worse outcomes. So we're just incredibly grateful.
Earlier, a van driver in the UK suffered a stroke while driving on a busy dual carriageway. Having managed to stop his vehicle, the rescuers are now desperately trying to reach the driver.
The lorry had obviously sandwiched the van between the lorry and the central reservation, so there was no access into the van at all. We couldn't open any door.
They even tried accessing the driver via the back doors, but no luck. Reaching him was looking impossible.
Tom initially tried to break the windscreen to get in and couldn't.
Luckily, other drivers had noticed the unfolding drama and stopped to help.
Fortunately, another guy who was there to help found a metal bar and broke the passenger window.
One of the guys then climbed in, manoeuvred the fellow so we could get hold of his arms, and we pulled him out through the passenger side window and laid him on the back of my trailer.
Yes, hello, ambulance, please.
Despite being safely out of his van, the man was still unconscious, so Renata wasted no time in calling the emergency services.
No, he's not unconscious at all. Both myself and Tom are first aid trained. We have to be through our job. There was no reactions from him, there was no movement. He was just literally a dead weight.
Yeah. His breathing's okay as well. Yeah, Tom, is it?
He was breathing. However, we were unsure whether he would deteriorate and potentially whether we could lose him. We just kept him warm, comfortable, and relayed all the information back to the emergency services until someone arrived. It seemed like a lifetime. It probably wasn't.
Luckily, the ambulance was soon on the scene and treated the man who had suffered a stroke. But it was thanks to the rescuer's quick thinking and bravery that he survived and went on to make a full recovery.
You know, that's got to be the luckiest guy ever, that so many people who would bother to help happen to be in the same place at the same time. I mean, whoever would have thought the safest place to have a medical issue is driving in the fast lane of a dual carriageway at speed.
Central reservation, which was actually keeping him from veering off anywhere else. A mile and a half down the road, that central reservation stopped. The van would have veered into the oncoming traffic in the dual carriageway, which could have been catastrophic. So yeah, Russell's actions were fantastic. I think what he did was phenomenal.
And for the humble heroes, it's a day none of them will forget in a hurry.
I'm not trying to dismiss what we've done as being extremely easy. There was no thought process. It was just a natural reaction. This guy needs help. Everybody was equally as much of a hero. I mean, I've been classed a hero. I don't look at it that way myself.
It was a pretty emotional day. Obviously, heading back from a funeral of a friend of ours. And then ending the day, I suppose, saving somebody's life. Very emotional day.
This is the moment that a team of 18 from the Mountain Rescue Services rescued a 17-year-old boy who had fallen from a 30-foot waterfall. Two months later, Harry and his parents have gone to the Mountain Rescue Centre.
Hello, Harry, nice to meet you.
Hi. To meet up for the first time with the team who saved him.
Ian. Yeah. So how are you, Harry?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good. Thanks to use.
Yeah.
Yep. Cast is off.
Yes.
In my splint.
Yeah, so what looked like could have been a long road to recovery, actually, you've been very lucky.
It was my hip I was most worried about, and that went basically straight away. So.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't until the next day when my friends were sort of feeding me all the social media, all the reports from the Mountain Rescue, and just the listing of all the people that had been there giving up their time for him.
There's two different mountain rescue teams involved, the Coast Guards, there was ambulance paramedics there, and they all did a fantastic job, particularly the volunteers from the Mountain Rescue, so we wanted to do some fundraising for them.
So we're really grateful for everything you've done for Harry, and we've been doing some fundraising for you guys. There's a cheque for each Mountain Rescue team.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
That is amazing. That's really generous.
Really fantastic.
You know, it doesn't cover a fraction of all the time that they've given, but it's just a way of saying thank you.
And we don't actually get to hear what's happened after an incident.
Really?
So to actually find out that you're well, you're going to make a full recovery, and you've raised some funds as well. It's really
massive thank you to all of them, really. Mountain rescue, paramedics in the helicopter, people in the helicopter, doctors, nurses, everything. Without them, it would have been a really different outcome, so I just need to be thankful for them, really, and just grateful for how lucky I've been.
But no reunion would be complete without the medic who treated him.
What have they been doing with your wrist then, Harry?
4 weeks till I can get back into rugby, so should be all
a bit
right.
longer than that, I think, probably.
So these are all some of the guys and girls who were there on the day as well. Yeah.
How you doing?
He's an incredibly lucky young man to have survived with the injuries that he did. Working on the air ambulance, I get to see a number of people who have falls, and it could have been much, much worse.
Back to the waterfall in a few days.
Yeah, just give us advance notice.
For Harry, these volunteers' heroic actions saved him from further injury, and his recovery has given him time to reflect on his actions.
I have learned that maybe I should stop being such an idiot with some of the things I do. Maybe I should be less of a risk taker.
People doing extraordinary things to help others.
If he didn't do what he did, we would have died.
Heroic acts that have sometimes meant the difference between life and death.
And he was just crying, don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me.
Amazing acts of courage.
It was just a natural reaction. This guy needs help.
Captured on dash cams, CCTV, and mobile phones. Incredible stories from the UK.
He put his life at risk just to save me.
And across the world.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
All the people that assisted with my rescues that day are my heroes.
We genuinely owe our lives to him.
Today on Saved on Camera. Two friends on holiday in Kenya face disaster as their fishing boat sinks.
I knew that the clock was ticking, and as soon as it got dark, we were done. It was terrifying.
In Alabama, USA, a skydiving student in a panic spins out of control, endangering his and the instructors' lives.
He kind of just pushed off the plane without actually stepping off the plane. It immediately sent us all under our backs.
I come out of the plane and we start flipping around, the horizon's spinning. Your orientation gets pretty messed up when you start doing that.
Thought I was going to die.
In the UK's Lake District, a climber makes a wrong move, causing him to take a fall.
Smacked into the cliff 20 feet below.
Having injured his foot, the only way to rescue him is by helicopter. But there's a problem.
The helicopter pilot started saying, "This is a really windy night. I'm really struggling."
And in London, a fire has started in the middle of the night in a block of flats.
He was shouting and screaming that his friend was trapped in a flat across the road. It was a basement flat and it was on fire.
The residents are all asleep.
Just get out.
They need to get them out, and quickly.
Spinning up the smoke.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. 10 miles off the coast of Mombasa. Sinking.
A dream trip for two men turns into their worst nightmare.
Mayday, we're going down, we're going down, we're going down. We're essentially dead in the water.
Miles from shore in the Indian Ocean, with no means of communication and darkness falling, they must try to hang on until help arrives.
I've never felt so helpless in my life. What happens if nobody comes? We're going to die.
Friends Ash and Mark first met at a festival close to both their hearts.
Glastonbury Festival, I've been going since 1997 and never missed a year. That's where I met Mark around 12 years ago. Bit of a random encounter, actually. We'd just been watching Snoop Dogg on the Pyramid stage, I think. We just hit it off straight away. Yeah, it's just like an instant connection, friendship. It was good. 11, 12 years later, we're still going together now. It spawned a great friendship.
But keen for new adventures, they decided to swap the muddy fields of Glastonbury for the sandy shores of Kenya.
Mark's been going to Kenya for the last few years with his daughter. So he suggested, instead of Glastonbury, let's go to Kenya. I'm like, awesome. But I'll take them on safari, you know, show you around the country. It'd be an amazing experience.
And for Mark, there's another pull to Kenya.
I've been big game fishing, particularly in Kenya, since I was 9, 10 years old, on the boat nearly every morning.
Seasoned fisherman Mark was excited that Ash was going to join him this time.
We decided to book just one half-day trip, just as a taster for him. Virtually no interest at all in fishing. It's not really my bag. However, the prospect of a day out on the ocean and on a cool boat and all that, I thought, well, yeah, that sounds pretty cool, and give it a go.
And the day started off promisingly.
So when I first saw the fishing boat, I was expecting some little tin pot wooden fishing boat, but no, it was a big twin-engined yacht-type sports boat. So we set off quite early in the morning, myself, Ash and a crew of 5. And within half an hour, we catch these tuna. And I was buzzing that Ash would call something. So I thought, oh, yeah, this is good, this. But then it just all got a bit quiet. Which is the normal in big game fishing, where you can spend hours and hours with no activity. So the skipper decided to steam a little bit further down the coast to find another spot where he thought there might be some more fish activity. We're going further and further out to sea. We ended up probably about 9, 10 miles offshore. Ash was having a little kip. I was chatting to the crew. So I kind of woke up from my doze, a little bit groggy. Then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. The reel starts whirring, and the crew just jump into life, and it's marlin, 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 marlin.
It was all systems go, as they'd caught one of the fastest fish in the world.
We'd hooked this black marlin, which is kind of like the holy grail of game fishing. Mark's got into the fighting chair and he's battling for this fish. Everybody was excited. He's clearly in his element. The fish then takes 100, 200 metres of line, dancing on the surface, jumping. And I'm sat on the upper deck watching all this and thinking, oh, come on, mate, get it done. The captain of the boat puts both engines on full power. The boat was having to get reversed and repositioned and basically trying to track or follow the fish. And in doing all this manoeuvring, quite a lot of water was washing over onto the lower deck. The boat's designed to take on an element of water on the deck, but it was quite obvious there was more water on the boat than there should have been.
The increasing amount of water on board was starting to ring alarm bells, but the crew seemed to have it under control. But for how long?
They went and opened up the hatch to look down into the engine room. And when they came up, you know, there was a clear look of concern on their faces.
The water was rising faster than they could bail it out, and panic was starting to set in.
At the back of the boat's going under. The owner of the boat comes upstairs. He's got panic or fear or something in his eyes.
And even first-time fisherman Ash could tell the situation was looking precarious.
Ash said to me at that time, he's like, are we going to be okay, mate? And I wasn't completely sure that we didn't have quite a serious problem.
The crew were still making desperate but futile attempts to avoid the boat sinking.
The captain decided to put both engines on full power. I think the idea was either gun it until we get to shore, or at least get as close as we can. But the boat's taken on that much water, the engine's under strain. 2 or 3 minutes into that, one of the engine failed. Oh, no, no, no. the engine alarm's going off, so you've got beep, 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 beep. Not long after that, the second engine goes. We're essentially dead in the water.
That's when the Mayday call went out.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
Mayday, mayday, we're going down, we're going down, we're going down.
That's the last thing you want to be hearing when you're on a boat.
As the boat began sinking, the panic on board escalated.
The alarm's going off, the boat's starting to tilt.
We're sinking, we're going down.
When their SOS call was received, there was a glimmer of hope.
Somebody from the shore picked up the Mayday call, saying, you know, where are you?
But that hope was to be cruelly dashed.
There wasn't any GPS on the boat, so we couldn't give any coordinates.
Oh, the situation's bad at this point.
And time was running out as the boat started to sink from under them.
At this stage, the boat is going on its side, so we're all clambering over the side of the boat. People are slipping off the boat and we're holding them back on.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
The boat was going to sink. We knew we needed to get off it. It was at this point when I said to the guys that when this thing goes down, we need to make sure we're well away from it. And everyone moves away and let go of the boat, and down it went.
Within a couple of minutes, the whole thing just went.
Later, miles from shore and with no help in sight, fear takes hold of the men.
I said to Ash, don't mention the S word.
Then it's spelled out S-H-A-R-K. It was harrowing times, man.
In America, a man learning to skydive goes horribly wrong.
I thought I'd lost both instructors, and the rules of skydiving is lose one, continue with the skydive, lose two, pull.
His actions done in panic make everything worse.
When he pulled out the pilot chute to deploy the parachute, it went around Jason's neck.
Jason Hills has a passion for extreme sports, one of which takes place 14,000 feet in the air.
I love skydiving. It's freedom. I don't think about anything else but just what I'm doing at that moment. Everything leaves my mind. It's kind of like my therapy.
Jason chose a center in Alabama to make his 4th ever skydive. Instructors Sam and Stephen were there to prepare him.
It's usually not a problem teaching somebody on the ground, but when you get up in the air and there's the stress and the sensations and the noise, and it's almost like fight or flight, and they're just they're worried about surviving.
As they reached 14,000 feet, Jason's fears had heightened.
As soon as it got to altitude, it became real when that door opened.
The jump is supposed to be, you exit the plane with 2 instructors holding on to you.
The student's supposed to give us a count, like a 1, 2, go. And we got the 1, 2, go, but he never really went. He kind of just pushed off the plane without actually stepping off the plane. And once that happened, it just kind of got a little weird from there.
It was like I was pulled out of the door and almost thrown over the top of Jason.
The unique situation in this one was he was upside down, like immediately out the door. Usually, they flip over as we're going out.
I come out of the plane and you start flipping around, the horizon's spinning. Your orientation gets pretty messed up when you start doing that.
With the clock ticking, the instructors must get this dive under control. But in the chaos, the worst happened.
I opted to let go because Steven, he seemed to be more in control than I was.
I thought that I was the one that was supposed to let go. After I let go, I realized that no one was holding on to Jason.
I knew I had lost Steven, I knew I had lost Sam, and I was alone in the air.
He was starting to rotate, and generally when a student starts to rotate, it only gets faster and a little more violent.
I thought I'd lost both instructors, and the rules of skydiving is lose one, continue with the skydive, lose two, pull.
Due to Jason's orientation, when he pulled out the pilot chute to deploy the parachute, it just went through the middle of them and then around Jason's neck.
When it was wrapped around my neck, I thought I was going to die.
His instructors had only seconds to react before the main parachute would open and likely strangle Jason.
When the pilot shoots out, the parachute's right behind it. I was just trying to make sure to get the lines out from around his neck before the parachute came out.
In the nick of time, Sam had managed to remove the lines from Jason's neck.
There was definitely a huge relief that he had a parachute and was going to be able to fly it now.
But as Jason had pulled the whole parachute too early, he was about to lose contact with his instructors.
After his parachute deployed, we separated from each other and came on down to a lower altitude before opening our parachutes. First thing we were trying to do is make radio contact so he didn't fly too far away from the airport.
Usually, you're not under canopy very long before you have radio communication with your instructor. The problem was, I had opened so high, I floated around for 6,000 feet before I had radio communication with him.
Finally, the ground was within reach. He just needed to land.
He landed about like a typical student does. They usually land a little bit hard on their first, I would say, 6 landings before they actually figure it out.
When I got to the ground, it was relief. It was just amazing. I was so happy that I lived through that.
After such a close shave, all 3 men had made it down pretty unscathed.
It was a little jokey and light because we try not to make it seem like, you know, oh my God, dude, you just almost died.
It was more of just a camaraderie and laughing about it, and hopefully it won't happen again.
And despite his close call, Jason, a natural-born adrenaline junkie, isn't planning on curbing his skydiving anytime soon.
A lot of people would have quit skydiving after that jump and maybe started bowling. But not me. I came back and my jump count's around 240 skydives.
But this is one skydive instructor Sam is not adding to his list of best adventures ever.
To date, the jump with Jason is my worst student jump that I've had. I actually have not had a student get away from me, deploy around his neck. Yes, this was quite a unique situation, honestly.
And Jason knows he owes his life to Sam and colleague Stephen.
I was so thankful to those guys. They did what they were supposed to, but they're very humble about it. They saved my life.
Earlier, we saw 2 friends stranded in the Indian Ocean.
Mayday, mayday.
After the boat they chartered for their fishing boat sank.
Within a couple of minutes, the whole thing just went. And down it went, and that was it.
With their mayday calls having gone unanswered, they feared the worst.
We are adrift 10 or so miles offshore, and we're at the mercy of the ocean. It was terrifying.
Now, in deep water, adrenaline and survival instincts kicked in fast.
We needed to stick together, so we created a circle, and we all held on to each other's buoyancy aids and rings, and so we were like, you know, nobody let go of anybody.
But as the men treaded water, fears were starting to surface.
For me, our biggest risk was drowning. What happens if nobody comes? We're going to drown? You know, we're going to die. Never felt so helpless in my life. I knew that the clock was ticking, and as soon as it got dark, we were done.
What they didn't know was that their mayday call had been picked up by a Singaporean oil tanker waiting to port in Mombasa. Chief Officer Lucas Hopp and Captain Robert Mikulski heard the call.
We were on the bridge together, and then suddenly we hear on the VHF Mayday calling.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Dreamcatcher.
Mayday, name of the vessel, Dreamcatcher, and we are going down.
It's human's life. That's the most important for us to rescue them. And then we start looking around to try to find them.
Despite wanting to help, without exact coordinates, they were searching for a needle in a haystack.
It's a very large area to search for. So it is very, very big problem to find the vessel.
Back with the men, drowning wasn't the only worry for the group left floating in the open ocean.
There was a point where I said to Ash, don't mention the S word.
And I thought he meant shipwreck. And then he spelled out S-H-A-R-K. Shark. And I'm like, what on earth have you said that for? Because I'd never even crossed my mind at all about sharks in the water until he said that. And of course, once he said that, that's all I could think about.
So that was going to, be a concern, especially after it got dark.
I became very aware of how much I was paddling my feet, treading water, and I made a conscious effort to minimise my movement.
We observed some fishing boat. We have binoculars, and the distance was about 8 miles. The vessel was capsizing.
The swell was incredible, really. 3, 4, 5 metres at a time. All you could see was a wall of ocean. It was unbelievable, unbelievable.
So you're scanning the coastline. On the horizon, we could see a ship.
Finally, they had a glimmer of hope.
All our focus was on this vessel. What if it just keeps going? What if it hasn't seen us? What if it just sails past us? Because I knew that was pretty much our only chance. Nobody else were coming. And if this tanker doesn't stop, we're done.
And we just watched it about 40 minutes of heading towards us, but not directly to us, but heading in our direction.
Anyway, it was difficult to see. We could see only heads. We could see only heads in the water.
And I guess it got to about half a mile away from us, and then it just stopped in the water. And it sat there for what seemed like an eternity, with nothing happening at all.
It was harrowing times, man.
Finally, the ship's lifeboat was on its way, and the wait looked to be over.
We lowered the boat, and in about 5 minutes, we were very close to the people in the water.
Then I swam out, got the rope, and then took that back to the crew, and then we all ultimately pulled ourselves up on the rope.
We just start pulling them to our lifeboat to pick them up on board.
As the nightmare came to an end, Ash was overwhelmed as he stepped onto the lifeboat.
I looked up, and the guy piloting the boat, Chief Officer Hop, looked down at me.
I said to him, now you are safe.
So all the adrenaline and everything else just left my body, and I just absolutely crumbled.
Yeah, he looks happy that he's on the boat now.
And that was it. It was the most amazing feeling.
But there was one last challenge they had to face.
Picking up survivors from the water was only the first part of the rescuing operation. When they came alongside the vessel, it was the second part, which was also very difficult because of swell and state of the sea.
As we were looking out, we can see the ladder doing this, and there was a very real danger of us getting smashed and squashed between the lifeboat and the ship.
One more difficult thing was that all those survivors had seasick, so they were weak at the moment of climbing to the ladder.
Thankfully, there was a large crew on the tanker to assist with the final stage of the rescue.
When all of them were on board safely, I took a deep breath, and I was happy that we could save them.
And they just really looked after us, Chief Officer Hop reappeared. He came to see us, made sure we were okay.
Lots of crew members were coming up and asking if they could take our photos. They've been involved in quite a major rescue operation, and they wanted to come and see who they'd plucked out of the ocean.
Now safe, The adrenaline left the men, and the reality of the ordeal hit them both.
Me and Ash, we literally just looked at each other and were like, wow, like, I cannot believe what we've just been through, and we're so, so lucky.
In the Lake District, in the UK, a dramatic ground and air rescue is launched when a climber falls off the side of a mountain.
Next thing I remember was just smacked into the cliff 20 feet below.
Keswick, a market town sitting at the north of England's Lake District. It's a popular stop-off for tourists and outdoor adventurers, and it attracted Bob Woods and his wife to open their own B&B in 2004.
We're very lucky to live here in the Lake District because everyone's so friendly. Everyone's here for almost the same reasons. Everyone just loves the outdoors.
Bob's days are full, and not just with the B&B.
I play in a ukulele band in Cockermouth called the Kooks. I do a lot of mountain biking, lots of climbing, weather permitting. I've been climbing 15, 16 years, 17 years. So I'm very competent. My head, which is the most important part, my head generally is all over it.
But it's not his head that is the problem. It is his sense of direction. Something Bob would admit causes a few jokes in his local climbing club.
I've got a very big reputation for getting lost on routes, and I'm often wandering all over the place, which brings lots of amusement to lots of people. Even me, because it's like, you know, what's the worst that can happen?
Bob was going to find that out, and on a special day too.
It was a Keswick Mountain Club meet, and it just happened on my birthday, July the 18th. It was Miners Crag. Miners Crag is over on the Newlands Valley, so it's quite remote. It's not so well climbed, so there's lots of stuff where there's never been grabbed hold of before.
The climbers divided into pairs. Having started with a relatively easy climb, Bob and his partner Dave decided to take it up a notch.
Harler is hard, very severe, but we were warmed up and we're both quite competent, so off we went. The first part was really straightforward and I led it very comfortably.
Their first position, known as a pitch, they'd successfully climbed, and it was Bob's partner Dave who took the second ascent.
He went up maybe 15 feet-ish and he said, "Oh, blimey, this feels a lot harder, Bob. Do you fancy having a go?" And I got 15 feet above Dave. I said, I put a bit of gear in. A cam is like a little device. You push a little sort of lever on the end of it and it gets smaller. And then when you feed it into the crack, then it just gets wider in the crack and hopefully holds. And I clipped it and I said to Dave, if I fall on this, there is no way on earth this is stopping me going anywhere. I moved up past it and I just reached up my left hand to quite a small crimp, put my fingers on it and it just all collapsed underneath my fingers and then I fell backwards. I smacked into the cliff 20 feet below Dave. Dave is now taking my full weight going at whatever miles per hour.
Moving at that speed could drag both climbers off the crag.
David put a bit of gear in and lucky enough that held both of us. So this one tiny little bit of gear, about an inch wide in the crack, had both of us hanging on it.
The pair were dangling off the cliff, and Bob knew a further fall would likely have been fatal.
It was just pure rock underneath us. It was just lots of rocks. And hopefully it just been very quick.
Later, things go from bad to worse.
I just sort of sat for a couple of minutes, stood up, agony, sat down, stood up again stupidly. The pain was awful.
Earlier, we saw friends Ash and Mark rescued following their fishing boat sinking off the coast of Mombasa. "6 months later, and back on dry land, Mark and Ash are meeting up for the first time with the men who saved them.
You know, Ash was sort of, it was never his kind of thing. He was like, you said this was going to be a good trip out. You know, look what's happened. I was like, oh my word.
Actually, when we were still in Kenya, it wasn't so bad. But once we got home back to the UK, that's when you know, when you see your family and all the rest, that's when the shock of it all hit more so, I think.
And how thankful we are to you for,
of course,
you know,
of course. Saved our lives.
Yeah.
Literally, saved our lives.
My only worry was that if you can climb with no injury on board
right,
the vessel.
Yeah, that was quite a climb up the side of the tanker. But not that it mattered. But yeah, but what a relief, you know, and of course you're the first face that I saw, and you look down at me and you said,
that was a good face to see. It's like,
yeah, so you look, I'm all obviously stressed, and I looked up and you looked down and you went, you're safe now. And as soon as you said that, I just crumbled completely.
The men know just how lucky they were and who they owe their lives to.
If we hadn't spotted them, they would have been in a hopeless situation because it was some 5 hours until darkness, and after darkness it would be impossible to find them in the water.
All of us on the boat owe our lives to the crew of the oil tanker. I genuinely believe, had they not found us, we wouldn't be here today.
As for next year's adventures, the friends have some important decisions to make.
Yeah, so we haven't thought about next year yet. Go back for the 50th anniversary of Glastonbury and go back to what we know and do every year. Maybe I will go back to Glastonbury, maybe, I don't know. But certainly no more boats.
In the UK, a police officer searching a house is interrupted by a neighbour.
He was shouting and screaming that his friend was trapped in a flat across the road. It was a basement flat and that it was on fire.
He rushes into the smoke-filled building to alert the residents.
It was pretty bad. You couldn't see the exit at all.
But can this police officer get everybody out in time?
We need to keep on at them. Look, we need to get out now, get out now.
Just get out. It's just filling up with smoke.
PC Neil Dobson is a police dog handler and has been with the force for 22 years.
It's all I wanted to do since I joined the police. I'd had dogs all my life. I wanted to work dogs, and I think it's the best job in the world. I like helping people, obviously, and I like going out there and making a difference. My bread and butter work is normally searching for people that run away from the police, searching for drugs in vehicles, drugs in houses, firearms and hidden cash.
But on this night in Croydon, PC Dobson becomes involved in an emergency that's not his usual type of call-out.
I was searching a house for drugs when we had a knock at the door from a member of the public who was shouting and screaming that his friend was trapped in a flat across the road. It was a basement flat and that it was on fire. As soon as you're told there's a fire, the lives are in danger, so everything you're doing right there and then gets dropped. We came out of the address, looked across the road and saw smoke bellowing out of the windows of the flat and can hear the guy inside screaming. I've run to the back of my car to put my dog away. 3 of my colleagues have run across the road and they've managed to drag the guy out through a kitchen window. It was then that a member of the public pointed out that this basement flat was connected to flats above, which were 3 stories high. And being 1 o'clock in the morning, everyone's asleep.
With thick smoke rising rapidly into the upstairs flats and residents unaware of the situation, PC Dobson races inside to raise the alarm.
You don't think, you just do. It's just kind of an instinct thing. There's people in trouble, and I know that if it was one of my family members, I'd know I'd want someone to go in and help them. So at that point, you just start shouting, fire, fire, get out.
Fire's growing, yeah? Just get out.
And you can't really rely on them. There may be vulnerable people that can't hear, can't see, disabilities, so every single flat had to be visibly cleared.
PC Dobson has to think fast to avoid potential disaster.
It was at that point that I realised, actually, I've really got to just start kicking doors in, because There wasn't time to allow for people to react and come out and put their clothes on. It's a case of you need to get out now because the smoke was starting to fill up into the ground floor. There were two girls that came in with me into the flats and they were helping residents out. There was a mum and a baby that needed some help getting out of a flat. They were helping them. My job pretty much was the brute force of getting all the doors open. I got all the way up to the 3rd floor. It was ticking in my mind that I didn't have long inside. I was concerned about the smoke coming up because it was already on the ground floor when I went in. You're wondering what's it going to be like when I come back down. The smoke had now hit the 1st floor. It's disorientating when you can't see, and it's a little bit confusing, and obviously you can't breathe, so you have to hold your breath.
Go, I can't see.
You could see probably about to sort of here. It was pretty bad. You couldn't see the exit at all.
But with the smoke rising and time running out, PC Dobson gave it one last go.
Tried kicking it, then we realised it was bolted from the inside.
PC Dobson manages to get into the last flat and thankfully discover that nobody is home.
I forced in probably about 8 to 9 doors. Yeah, and it was the final one that bust my foot. It was the fact that I was aided by a big adrenaline rush, so you don't even notice it at the time. It wasn't until probably about 2 hours after the incident that I went to get out the car and stood on my foot, and then I was like, ouch.
PC Dobson guided the disorientated residents through the thick smoke towards the exit.
People were standing out now on the street in dressing gowns, and you hear the fire engines coming and you realise how serious it is.
Usually, it's the fire brigade who are first on the scene of a fire, so it comes as quite a surprise to Station Officer Catherine Skinner to find police officers.
Normally, we will be there quicker and on scene dealing with the situation long before the police or the ambulance arrive. Although they said they had got everybody out, we needed to do a secondary sweep just to make sure, especially seeing as it would have been quite difficult to them in the smoke, and we needed people in breathing apparatus just to ensure that that was the case. Smoke was quite thick and black, and that certainly raises my blood pressure a little bit because what I'm sending my firefighters into could be a dangerous situation. A basement's a particularly dangerous place for a fire. Quite often there's very limited ventilation, difficult to gain access. You have to go through a heat barrier descending into a basement. There is a potential for a greater loss of life.
After a thorough search of the building, firefighters confirm that no residents are left inside the smoke-filled building.
I was concerned when we first arrived that it would spread to neighbouring flats or the flats above, but because the crew was so quick in their attack on the fire, we did contain it to the original flat.
With all residents accounted for and thinking nothing of his heroic actions, it was business as usual for PC Dobson.
Basically, I came out and obviously the carnage outside of people in shock. They were treated by ambulance crews and fire brigade, and I then left the scene. So I literally went straight back into shift mode and cracked on with the rest of my shift.
It's great that the police were there so early to get people out, because the smoke would have been getting worse and worse. So the earlier the occupants were out, the better. And it certainly made our lives easier knowing that we didn't have 4 floors worth of occupants to evacuate ourselves.
I spoke to my sergeant afterwards and told him that I'd injured my foot. He said he'd look at my body cam footage to see how the injury took place so he could do the injury report, and then obviously he saw the whole incident take place.
PC Dobson's own safety was the last thing on his mind.
All I wanted was peace of mind that everybody did get out, because the smoke was that bad that I think you probably would not have survived much longer in there. Will I do it again? Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I wouldn't even think about it. To me, it's just doing my job.
Oh, good lad. Good lad.
Back in the UK, 2 climbers are dangling off a cliff, held on by just a tiny bit of gear. If it fails, they face certain injury or even death.
It was just pure rock underneath us. It was just lots of rocks. And hopefully it's just been very quick. 10, 15 minutes later. A couple of the guys had finished the climb, they'd seen us, so they made their way across and they fixed themselves into the rock. Then they fixed themselves to Dave and they got Dave back up onto the ledge. And they had me tied off. They just said, Bob, we're going to have to lower you down. So they lowered me down gently to where the first place I stopped, where I could sort of like get myself really comfortable.
Here, Bob realised his injuries.
I just sort of sat for a couple of minutes, stood up, agony, sat down, stood up again stupidly. The pain was awful.
They were going to need to be rescued, and the call came through to the Keswick Mountain Rescue Team and John Hunston.
Somebody who's fallen from a crack and potentially have much more serious injuries. They might have some internal bleeding, which is always difficult to contend with on the hill.
As John reached the scene, he was surprised to see a familiar face.
I thought I recognised him, and Bob said to me, "Hello, John." So, "Oh, hello, Bob, what are you doing here?" It's very strange to rescue somebody that you find you know.
But any catch-up between the friends would have to wait, as the question of rescuing Bob was much more pressing.
The first thing they did, they assessed where I'd fallen from, what I fell on, and what parts were hurting. When he just touched my heel, it was like, he said, we're not sure it says, but it could be a broken heel.
His injury would stop Bob being able to climb down, even with the mountain rescue team as his guide.
The particular area that he was in was extremely broken and bouldery and unpleasant. So getting air support in that sort of situation helps enormously.
We're about 3.5 hours in now. And then there's like the great big, and this great big red and white helicopters appeared, sort of like 400 or 500 feet above.
Right away, there was a problem.
The helicopter pilot started saying, this is a really windy night up here. I'm going to have to try and line up into the wind. And he tried it about 4 or 5 times, and he said, this is, you know, I'm really struggling. Eventually, maybe 30 minutes later, he felt confident enough to lower his winchman down.
But the elements were getting worse for the pilot.
He said, it's so windy now. He said, we can't start winching you in because the wind is, you're going to start spinning. We're just going to, like, go up a little and just fly off at speed to keep the stretcher in a straight position.
And I have an enduring vision of him sort of disappearing into the sunset underneath his helicopter.
When Bob made it inside the helicopter, the crew did their best to end his ordeal on a happy note.
The blokes winched me into the helicopter, and they started doing all the paperwork there and said, oh, July the 18th. And then they started singing happy birthday to me, which was really nice, because nobody else had that day. They were the first.
At the hospital, X-rays confirmed that Bob did, in fact, break his heel. But he knows it could have been much worse.
If I'd have hit my head on my neck, that would have been all over there, maybe, so I did get away with it.
Bob knows that it's all down to the skills and dedication of Keswick Mountain Rescue, and he still pops in to visit them and update them on his fundraising activities.
Hiya, John.
All right,
How you doing?
Good to see you again.
I was just walking past, I thought I'd pop in and say hello.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice.
How's tricks?
Is it 2 years ago now?
2 years July.
Is it? Is it? Yeah.
But still hurting.
Is it?
Still hurting.
Oh dear.
Doctor said 1 year, now it's been 2+, and I'm still,
Gosh.
not quite right.
So what does that stop you doing?
Nothing.
Oh right, good.
I'm just it's not a pain, it's discomfort. It's as opposed to pain.
Yeah.
Bob, though, retains a positive outlook on the events of that July day.
It wasn't a bad way to finish a day up. A nice helicopter ride in the sunset.
It was a great birthday present, wasn't it?
Oh,
Helicopter
yeah.
ride. Yeah, you pay a lot for that.
I'm sure I owe somebody a lot of money for that. Especially you guys, walking all the way in.
And he has a fundraising update for John after a successful busking event with his ukulele.
So we started at 11, and by 1 o'clock we had raised about 300 quid plus. We know it's going to a very, very good cause.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We really appreciate that.
I was very, very lucky, yeah. It could have gone very, very wrong.
People doing extraordinary things to help others.
If he didn't do what he did, we would have died.
Heroic acts that have sometimes meant the difference between life and death.
And he was just crying, don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me.
Amazing acts of courage.
It was just a natural reaction. This guy needs help.
Captured on dash cams, CCTV, and mobile phones. Incredible stories from the UK.
He put his life at risk just to save me.
And across the world.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
All the people that assisted with my rescues that day are my heroes.
We genuinely owe our lives to him.
Today on Saved on Camera. In South Africa, a couple on a mission to save rhinos end up needing to be saved themselves.
And I thought, I have no idea how we're going to get out of this.
They are over 200 kilometers from the nearest city and help. And even when rescue services do arrive, they are not going to find it easy.
Very concerned that for the rest of my life I would be known as the rescuer who bumped the aircraft off the cable and killed 2 people.
In the UK, a mum on the school run has a seizure at the wheel of her car.
Whilst I was seizing, my foot was pushed onto the accelerator.
Her 8-year-old son has taken over control, but he's out of his depth.
I didn't really want to steer the car, I just went for it.
It's the start of rush hour, and they're in the fast lane, travelling at 65 miles an hour.
We soon noticed there's a lady in distress in there, and a young boy hanging onto the steering wheel with fear in his eyes.
In Oklahoma, USA, a flash flood sees a woman lose control of her car, careering into a creek and trapping her underwater.
We didn't know if she could breathe, if she could get her seatbelt off, or if the pressure was too much on the doors to even open them.
She didn't have a whole lot of time. The water was rising in the creek. She needed help quick.
And in the UK, a wild deer is trapped by a rope. A trio of wildlife warriors are its only hope. They know time is against them.
From the point of capture to the point of release has to be less than 30 minutes. Otherwise, you're looking at a deer that is likely to have a heart attack and die on you.
A light aircraft is entangled in a zip line 100 meters in the air. The pilot and passenger are left dangling upside down, unable to escape.
And there was just oil and fuel dripping down on us.
If the plane dislodges, they will plummet to almost certain death.
You literally think that any second you're gonna fall and you're gonna die.
Peter Gadding is a 63-year-old commercial pilot from South Africa who's been flying planes for 32 years.
Oh, I've always just loved flying. My late father was a pilot. I just had it in my veins, eh? I just decided one day I needed to fly.
Peter's wife, Mary, is also a keen flying enthusiast.
We flew a lot together with the children and without them. We went on holidays together in a little plane. Peter is very responsible as a pilot. He doesn't take chances at all. He's just a really good pilot, yeah.
The pair are keen conservationists and volunteer for an anti-rhino poaching charity.
We have an organisation called the Battaliers. They were looking for volunteers to fly the anti-rhino poaching missions again. And so, without hesitation, Mary and I volunteered. Is just, it's a wonderful thing to be able to do that. I had done 3 various patrols before, accompanied by Mary. I'm controlling the aircraft and so on, and she's a second pair of eyes.
You look out the side and just see if you can find any rhino that are dead or alive, and look for poachers.
We're a team, just working together.
One day, the couple were out flying on an anti-poaching mission.
It was a normal patrol. It was a nice morning. The visibility was great. Well, we had pretty much finished flying the patrol. I was about to turn back. We'd been flying for a number of hours. I decided to change the route up a little bit.
But this change of plan proved to be pivotal.
Next thing, there was this almighty crash, which was so scary. It was just actually indescribable. The actual impact was just unbelievable. I'm getting all emotional.
The aircraft hit the zipline. It sort of sprung forward and then backwards. It was the most awful noise. And then we were bouncing, hanging upside down onto the zipline, and there was just oil and fuel and stuff dripping down on us. It was like just the most awful smell, and I thought, I have no idea how we're going to get out of this. I hadn't a clue what was going on. I mean, you just don't hit things in the air. After a few seconds, I remembered, oh my God, we've actually hit the zipline. Didn't think that there was going to be a chance of being rescued. I can't even describe how terrifying it was for Mary and I, hanging upside down like that. We just held each other's hands and just hung there. You literally think that any second you're gonna fall and you're gonna die.
My heart started pounding. I was actually worried that I was gonna have a heart attack. My thought straight after that was, we actually are going to die.
You know, all your blood is going to your head and out of your feet, and you're pretty much hanging on the seatbelt, and you can't move because of fear of falling. The discomfort was nothing compared to the fear.
It was just literally like being in a nightmare, but being awake.
Later, saving the couple turned into a risky situation.
We approached fairly carefully. When I saw what was holding the aircraft up, the anxiety went up.
In the UK, a car captured on a dash cam during a busy rush hour is out of control. It's travelling at 65 miles per hour and is in danger of crashing into the central reservation.
Something was going on up ahead, saw a car veering from side to side.
Swerving about all over the road.
An 8-year-old boy is helpless inside, but he's not about to give up.
The car was shaking and my mum was shaking.
The ties that bind a mother to her son are notoriously strong, but for one Colchester family, it's a bond that ended up saving their lives.
My name is Lauren. I'm a special needs teacher. I live at home with my son Ben and my partner Joe. Ben is quite mature for his age, very in touch with his emotions. So we do have a close bond, and I do feel like he's more like my friend than he is my son. Mum's hair's big in this one.
Who's?
The one he's about to fight.
She's funny. Sometimes annoying.
Ben absolutely loves playing video games. If he's not outside playing with his friends, he will be in his room playing video games, especially car video games. Those are his favourite.
Ben's love of car video games was to play a crucial role on one particular day.
Nothing felt out of the ordinary at all in terms of what I was feeling that day.
Right, you ready?
Let's go. After school had finished, I was just looking forward to getting home and getting dinner on.
She was happy, she was saying hello to me. She was just driving normally.
We were driving along a very busy A road at the time.
So how was school today?
The journey home from school to our house is roughly about 30 minutes. It does involve a lot of busy A roads. It can get quite scary, a lot of impatient drivers trying to get home. About 3:30, we were talking about our days. Again, nothing out of the ordinary.
But that soon changed as Ben started to notice his mum acting strangely.
I first realised something was different when she wasn't really listening to me. And she just wasn't listening to me. What are we doing tomorrow? Mum!
In a van, just behind Lauren's car, were workmates Jimmy Dowsett and Billy Smith.
Me and Jimmy had been working on site all day and we was just on our way home.
So finishing the day, we're tired, it's December, so just wanted to get home to the family, really. The traffic was very busy that night. People coming home from work, people leaving school. I'd moved lane into the fast lane. A car started veering towards the central reservation.
Something was going terribly wrong inside the car.
The car was shaking, and my mum was shaking.
Apparently, I then suddenly started aggressively shaking, dribbling, and my eyes were closed. My hands were still tightly gripped on the steering wheel. Whilst I was seizing, my foot was pushed onto the accelerator.
The car started heading back over the other lanes.
I just assumed someone had fallen asleep at the wheel.
And I saw outside of the window that we're skidding against the walls.
Now travelling at 65 miles per hour, the car was dangerously out of control.
Apparently, Ben leant over me. He was sat on the handbrake so that he could reach over.
I didn't really want to steer the car, I just went for it.
He put the hazard lights on before he started steering the car.
It was quite difficult. It was very hard to steer it.
We soon noticed there's a lady in distress in there and a young boy hanging onto the steering wheel with fear in his eyes.
Yeah, we knew we had to do something.
Can't say I had a plan for stopping the car. I just decided that I needed to help see them off the road.
The car was weaving from side to side.
I kept looking around so I couldn't crash into anyone.
Pulled up alongside it so he wasn't putting any more danger on the road. If he'd let go of the steering wheel, could have veered back into the road and anything could have happened.
Once we kept the van in a straight line and Ben done the same with the car, and then we slowly edged it over.
If he hits my van, damages my van, it doesn't matter, does it? You just want that boy to be safe.
And then I steered the car onto the grass.
When they went up the verge, I was speaking to Billy and I said, what's happening? He said, right, they're up the verge, just pull up and stop.
And then it slowed down.
But it wasn't over yet.
She did stop and then she started again. I'm assuming she fell back onto the accelerator and started driving towards us again. I told Jimmy to accelerate because she's going to hit us.
And then she fainted.
Billy jumped out while the van was still moving.
I knew I had to stop the car. Ben was screaming to help his mum, and also she was still unconscious at this point, so we stopped the car.
I went round to the side Lauren was on. She was still out of it.
I just checked her airways were clear because her head was back. I checked she had a pulse and then phoned 999. I just remember it being really cold and Ben was freezing cold. Obviously, I spoke to Ben for quite a long time. I was very, very worried about his mother.
The first thing I remember after waking up, Ben was next to me, looking quite distressed. There were just strangers around the car making a huge fuss.
It didn't take her long coming round. When she started to try and talk to us, very disorientated and didn't know what was going on and it wasn't making sense, wanted to drive off again. So we just had to calm her down and make sure the keys were out of the ignition.
She was really confused what was happening.
I was trying to piece together why we were suddenly on the side of the road, because to me it felt as if I just blinked for a split second.
The two men waited with Ben and his mum until the emergency services arrived and then left.
When I finally got the full story of what of what happened, it was when I was in the ambulance with Ben and the paramedics on the way to the hospital. I was so shocked. I mean, at first, when Ben told me, I actually laughed. I thought he was joking, and it wasn't until the paramedics actually confirmed that it was likely that I'd had a seizure that I realised that I had just had a seizure at the wheel, driving 65 miles an hour down a busy road. After having multiple tests, the doctors strongly believed that the seizure was either stress-induced or it was due to medication I was taking at the time. Ben has been surprisingly humble about it. Paramedics genuinely believe that if he didn't do what he did, we would have either been seriously injured or we would have died.
Later, Ben and his mum meet up with the men who saved them for the first time.
The main reason I wanted to help was because when I pulled upside, I saw Ben, thought of my own son, thought of my own family, really.
Back in South Africa, an aerial rhino patrol has gone wrong. A couple in a small plane have accidentally flown into a zip wire, leaving them precariously balanced.
I can't even describe how terrifying it was for Mary and I, hanging upside down like that.
It was just literally like being in a nightmare, but being awake.
Despite the life-threatening situation, Peter manages to call for help.
Called up the anti-rhino poaching people and I said, look, we've hit something. I don't think I even realised it was the zipline at the time. And they raised the alarm.
Rob Thomas is a volunteer with the South African Mountain Rescue Team and is the one to take the call.
The message came in and it was a fairly brief message. It just said aircraft crash, power lines, Pilanesberg, stand by.
The rescue services are on their way. They're not going to find it easy.
The two helicopters came and that was horrible because, you know, you don't know if you're going to get blown off the zip line.
We approached fairly carefully at the same altitude as the aircraft. We didn't ever want our downwash getting near it. Took a look and our primary concern was what is holding this aircraft in place. When I saw what was holding the aircraft up, blue anxiety went up because the only thing holding the aircraft in place is there are 6 bolts or 8 bolts that bolt the propeller onto the flange that is mounted to the drive shaft. And one of those bolts was on the other side of the cable. That was all that was preventing them from coming off.
With their life hanging in the balance, Rob has some difficult choices to make.
If the aircraft did come off while we had somebody at the aircraft, first of all, we would kill whoever was there, but we'd also probably end up with our rescuer getting entangled in the aircraft, which would quite possibly pull the police helicopter out of the sky. So we rejected that option, which left the only real option being to come down the cable.
And that dangerous maneuver fell to Rob, sending him 500 meters down a cable to rescue them.
I don't think there was time for concern over my own safety. It was more a case of just trying to be methodical, trying to be calm.
We could actually see him coming down to us, and it just seemed to take forever.
In this case, speed is not your friend.
He did it very slowly and meticulously because he was also still concerned that if he was to make too many movements that it would also dislodge the aircraft.
I was very concerned that for the rest of my life I would be known as the rescuer who bumped the aircraft off the cable and killed 2 people. But at the same time I realized that that was the only way we could get it to happen. So it was a case of go ahead, do your best, be as careful as you can, and hope like mad and do a lot of praying.
But once Rob reaches the stricken pair, the next big question is, how is he going to get them out of the plane?
Well, the first thing he did was secure the aircraft to the zipline. Then we knew we were not going to fall off anymore. It was just a question of trying to extract us out of the aircraft without dislodging it either.
The first thing that the pilot said to me is, listen, don't take this the wrong way, but I'm really, really glad to see your face. The next thing he said to me is, please take my wife out first, which was a very noble sentiment, but I had to point out to him that he was between myself and his wife. And I didn't want her climbing over him if I could just get him out of the way first. So I simply said to him, sorry, bud, you're in my way. Here's a harness. Here's how you put it on. get cracking.
With chivalry out of the window, it was time for Peter to get out.
He came out fairly quickly. It was obviously very difficult if you imagine sitting in a garden chair and somebody pushes you over on your back. So you've got your feet in the air. I call it rocket launch position. So they'd been hanging in rocket launch position for a couple of hours. Once he had it on, he slowly climbed into the upright position and carefully stepped out of the aircraft.
Even though it was high up, hanging on that zip line, that was nothing compared to the fear of being in that aircraft for all that time.
But as Rob turned to save Mary, the weather was getting worse and fear was setting in.
I put my harness on, and which was not very easy in a tiny little plane, and you're trying not to move. And then I climbed over onto Peter's vacant seat.
She was halfway out and she said to me, "I'm stuck." And my initial thought was, you can't be stuck, you're climbing out of the aircraft. And I looked behind her, and the grab handle in the center of the back had managed to toggle itself on the throttle of the aircraft. So I leant over to untoggle her, and as I did that, my feet slipped off the wing strut. So I went upside down. She started to get a little bit anxious. All I said is, keep it together, you're almost out. It was literally a case of, she was probably 10 seconds away from being out of the aircraft. We got her up, we got them both onto the wing strut.
It was very high and so scary. The wind had come up, I still didn't feel safe at all. And then they started winching us very slowly. He first lowered Peter, and then he lowered me. I loved being lowered down onto the mountain, and then I knew that I was safe.
The touchdown moment on the ground was a revelation, partly because I discovered at that point that my feet and my legs didn't work anymore. I'd been hanging in harness for so long that I didn't actually have the strength to stand.
My sandals flew out the plane, so I had no shoes on. So Rob decided that I should be airlifted with the helicopter, and then Peter and Rob and the mountain rescue guys walked back. And they just put me in the ambulance and checked me out, and I was fine. My blood pressure was even normal.
There was just this enormous amount of relief. It was miraculous. We were very, very lucky.
The actual tension of that situation only hit me when I got home. It was only then that my brain started to process what I'd gone through.
Well, Rob is our hero, and actually all of them were absolutely wonderful, but Rob was the one who got us out.
I don't think there's any words that can describe the amount of respect and thankfulness that I have for all those people that were involved in the rescue operation.
The outcome could have been very different. Just the fact that they hit the wire and bounced back and dropped enough to catch on the back of the propeller. The fact that we got 2 people out of there was incredibly satisfying.
What started out as a positive expedition ended in a terrifying accident that could so easily have resulted in tragedy.
I think I'm maybe just a little more grateful to be alive. Yes, and have my wife in one piece and well.
More than anything, it's given me a bigger appreciation for life, because that was a miracle. I would love to do the anti-rhino poaching again. I would do it in a heartbeat.
Absolutely no reason why we wouldn't go and do more anti-rhino poaching patrols anytime that we are able to do that with pleasure. We'll be back.
In the UK, a wild deer has become trapped in the middle of the East Sussex countryside.
This poor deer that was quite clearly entangled in blue rope around its antlers.
A trio of wildlife warriors are its only hope, but any reckless release could be dangerous.
Getting hold of the head, the antlers, that is the most dangerous moment. You can then find yourself being kicked or stabbed with the antlers.
In the middle of East Sussex sits a rescue centre. It's a haven for injured wildlife, and it was set up in 1996 by animal lover Trevor Weeks. But his altruism started much earlier than that.
I've done this since I was a kid. I've always liked the countryside, I've always liked animals, and it's something that my parents have sort of instilled in me to respect nature and respect the countryside.
Kathy Martin joined the centre 11 years ago.
Trevor set it up on a small scale. I just sent him an email, just sort of said, you know, I'm available, you know, if I can help at all, then I'd love to, and so gradually got involved that way.
It's a labour of love for both of them.
We all work really, really well together. When we've been able to get an animal back to full health and return it to the wild, then that gives you the most heartwarming feeling you can ever experience.
I think the thing with the wild animals, and with any animal really, is it can't help itself. It needs humans to help them. They can't say when they're ill, they can't say what they need, and it's down to us to assess them and to help them.
Now with a team of 150 volunteers, the centre routinely answers between 4,000 and 5,000 calls a year. One dramatic call-out, though, would end up capturing the nation.
Hello, Wildlife Rescue. I actually had a call first thing in the morning from a couple just outside of Blackboys, which is in the middle of East Sussex. And they said they could see a deer that was entangled. Its antlers were tangled in some rope attached to an old apple tree. I phoned my colleagues Kathy and Chris, and I asked them to basically bring our transit ambulance as well as all our entanglement rescue gear up to site.
The team had taken similar calls in the past, so knew the protocol that was required.
Any rescue like that has to be done by at least 3 people because of how dangerous and difficult they are to restrain and then cut free and release.
When we first got there, this poor deer that was quite clearly entangled in blue rope around its antlers.
Once we're all together on site, we all have a little team meeting to discuss how we're going to approach it and how we're going to cut it free and how we're going to release it.
But the team must be quick, or the results could be fatal.
Deer are very highly strung animals at the end of the day. They've got a lot of adrenaline naturally in their bodies, and as a result of that, when we pin them and secure them to the floor, they're going to get very, very stressed. Do you want to go that side of that, mate? That whole process, from the point of capture to the point of release, has to be less than 30 minutes. Otherwise, you're looking at a deer that is likely to have a heart attack and die on you.
His eyes are sort of staring them really wide, often they're drooling. You can see their chests heaving. They're just so exhausted from trying to free themselves that, you know, that's what motivates you to get in there and to get into a dangerous situation and actually deal with it as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
They needed to begin by minimising the deer's movement, slowing it down.
Normally in these situations we try to use like a walk towards net. Yeah.
The walk towards net is almost like a tennis net, and we use that to try and corral the deer and encourage them to run into it. It gets them under control and gives us an opportunity then to get on top of them and to control them.
But there was a problem.
We spread the walk towards net around the outside of the apple tree, but it was almost pointless because we just couldn't get it where we needed it to be. Yeah.
To stand any chance of releasing the deer, the team needed to find a way to subdue it without using a net.
Right.
And they suddenly got that chance.
Right. At one point, the deer sort of trips over and then falls, and it gave Chris the ideal opportunity to literally spring forward and pounce onto its shoulders.
And we managed to get its head covered. We use a pillowcase to cover their eyes because they tend to quieten right down once they're in darkness.
Getting that animal pinned down and getting hold of the head, the antlers, pinning the shoulders down, that is the most dangerous moment. Neck removed as well. I dealt with a deer only a couple of days ago and found myself with some pretty horrendous marks on my arms as a result of it kicking out.
But the clock is ticking.
From the point of capture, we know we've got less than 30 minutes to get that animal released. As soon as Chris and I had full control over the deer, Kathy then comes in.
My role there was really to get that rope off as quickly as possible. You're just cutting it and cutting it, hoping that it starts getting loose enough where you can work out how to get it free as quickly as possible.
For Trevor and his colleague Chris, who continued to hold the deer down, it's a hazardous part of the process.
In any rescue like that, when you jump onto the back of the deer, you're almost imitating what a predator would do. So at that point, the animal will quite often play dead. And they try to lull you into a false sense of security so that you loosen your grip, you loosen control, and then all of a sudden they will kick out and start panicking again and trying to get free. If you lose control of them, you can then find yourself being kicked or stabbed with the antlers.
It's a rescue with danger all along the way. Kathy must cut through the rope as quickly as she can, but they all need to stay alert.
The second most dangerous moment is actually the point of release.
After cutting most of the rope free, I could tell that there was one section left that was holding the deer tightly, so I let the others know that I was going to be cutting that last section.
We then have to remove the walk towards net, get that out of the way, and make sure the deer has then got a clear escape route. On this occasion, we were a little bit concerned because going straight forward, it would have to go through a hedge, across the lane, and then into another field.
The deer's going to feel that release of pressure and think it's free when obviously we've still got Chris sitting on its back.
But the team know they have to get this deer released, and now.
You're going right, I'm going right. Chris called 1, 2, 3 release. Chris and I would then release the deer at the same time.
As Chris jumped off the deer, he then pulls the head covering off, getting out the way as quickly as possible so that the deer can then jump off and hopefully run off into the distance.
He just jumped straight through the hedge, across the road, straight through the hedge the other side, and just legged it across the field. And that was really nice to see him do that, and so pleased. You couldn't have asked for better.
Even though they've done this type of rescue many times before, there's still a tidal wave of emotion after every successful release.
I think you can always hear that in our voices at the end of any deer release. It's almost sort of slightly hysterical. The emotion is just such a relief seeing them run off.
Being able to release a deer like that is amazing. It's probably one of the most amazing experiences you can do, to be honest. You know, you go from seeing how scared those eyes look to then that relief on their face when they're able to run away. And it is such a nice thing to experience. It's really heartwarming.
In America, a sudden downpour in Oklahoma is creating hazardous conditions.
I saw a car, all of a sudden they skidded in the rain and then went straight into a creek.
Emergency services were on their way, but time was critical.
She was under the water was rising, and she needed help quick.
One eyewitness caught it all on camera.
Oh, gosh. My name is Kara Copes. I live here in Oklahoma. It was a spring day, and it had been raining, and it started just getting heavier and heavier. The radio was saying that it was a flash flood warning, and I noticed that the water was filling up on the sides of the road, and the ditches were starting to get a little tall.
Cara wasn't the only driver doing battle with the elements.
My name's John Johns. The weather was pretty bad. You could hardly see in front of you. There was water covering the roads, so you had to be really cautious.
Whether cautious or not, one driver was about to suffer the full force of the floods.
As I was driving home, I saw a car coming in the opposite direction toward me. All of a sudden, they skidded in the rain. I saw the water just start spraying, and then I saw her car start to slide. It flipped over right into the side of the road and was going upside down in the grass. And all of a sudden, it went right into this creek. So the car is now in the water, upside down. I immediately turned around and called 911. I could see other people getting out of their cars and rushing to the scene.
Heating engineer John wasn't far behind.
I was coming down the road and I saw what looked like just a bunch of vehicles sitting on the side of the road with people standing, all looking towards the ditch. When you see the vehicle, immediately your heart kind of sinks.
Oh.
I asked, is somebody in the car?
Anybody in there? Yes.
And they said yes. The first thing that went through my mind was, they need help. And then I began to think, as a father, that's somebody's child. I couldn't imagine not doing something at that point.
I mean, she is underwater, probably in a seatbelt. Water is rising. She's upside down. We didn't know if she could breathe, if she could get her seatbelt off, or if the pressure was too much on the doors to even open them.
She didn't have a whole lot of time. The water was rising in the creek. She needed help quick.
By now, other drivers had joined the rescue.
There were lots of guys. Several had jumped in the water. They were yelling, talking about how they could get this car open. Should they break the glass? It was just so shocking.
John and the other rescuers were running out of time.
We've tried unlocking the doors, we've tried opening doors, and nothing's happening. The car was upside down. I couldn't see her. I just knew she was in there. I knew we had to get her out. It's not working. Nothing I'm doing is working. Part of you wants to give up. It's like you can't.
John and the others made another attempt.
We began rocking the vehicle back and forth, and the glass on the window broke. When the window broke, we knew the fight wasn't over at the same time because she still hadn't emerged. When she surfaced, when she come up out of the water, people on the grass all began to cheer.
Suddenly, we saw a man pulling her out, and we were just so relieved. I probably took the first deep breath since I had been there.
For John, though, there was still a job to do.
The battle wasn't even over. We still had to get her out of the water and to safety. The water is still high, water's still rising. We didn't know exactly how we were going to get her to safety.
But luckily for them, the emergency services had arrived.
It was such like a burden lifted off, knowing that somebody with professional training was going to be there to help.
She was a little cold and shivery, but I walked up and gave her a hug and told her, I'm so glad you're still with us. Nobody ever plans for something like that to happen.
Knowing someone's life in your hands is a feeling that can't be described. There's not words for it.
The actions of John and the other rescuers that day has had a lasting effect on Cara.
I feel like everyone who jumped in the water was they're just all heroes. People just really caring for someone they didn't even know.
I'm not a hero. I was just doing the right thing at the right time. Not helping is not an option if you're able.
Earlier in the UK, we saw a mother saved by the quick actions of her 8-year-old son when she had a seizure at the wheel while travelling at 65 miles per hour on a busy road.
I knew something bad was happening when she wasn't steering the wheel.
Unconscious, but with her foot still firmly on the accelerator, it was down to Ben to try and steer them to safety.
I managed to reach the steering wheel and I managed to steer the car onto the grass.
In a vehicle behind, Jimmy and Billy saw what was happening and helped Ben manoeuvre the car to safety and alerted the emergency services.
We noticed there's a lady in distress in there.
Yeah, we knew we had to do something.
I mean, at first, when Ben told me, I actually laughed. I thought he was joking. And it wasn't until the paramedics actually confirmed that it was likely that I'd had a seizure that I realised that I had just had a seizure at the wheel, driving 65 miles an hour down a busy road. After having multiple tests, the doctors strongly believed that the seizure was either stress-induced or it was due to medication I was taking at the time. Ben has been surprisingly humble about it. Paramedics genuinely believe that if he didn't do what he did, we would have either been seriously injured or we would have died.
A year later, it's a big day for Ben and his mum, as they are meeting up with the men who helped to save them for the first time.
Hi Ben, all right?
Yeah.
Hi.
What did you guys see?
The first thing we saw was the car veering to the central reservation.
Okay.
So we've come up alongside you, realised there was something wrong, and saw Ben sort of hanging on to the steering wheel. So we sort of just tried to follow the car off the road, really.
Oh, thank you so much. It's quite distressing that I don't remember any of it. I think that's the worst part. I have no recollection of any of it. I can only go by what other people have told me, by looking at the dash cam footage. That's probably the worst part for me.
Please save my mummy, that's what he said.
Did he?
But positives have come out of the event.
A lot of our friends, when they found out what happened, they actually took the time to sit down with their children and tell them what to do if it ever happened to them. So in a way, that's good as well.
So something good come out of it.
Yeah, something good has definitely come out of it, yeah.
And Lauren and Ben now have the chance to thank them.
You're heroes too, really, because I think if you weren't there, he could have possibly been on the road even longer, and something else could have happened. So, you know, thank you so much.
The main reason I wanted to help was because when I pulled upside, I saw Ben, thought of my own son, thought of my own family, really.
A lot of people would have just driven past or just driven past slowly, had a look, oh, that looks bad, and then just carried on. So for you to actually stop and help Ben and stay with us until you knew that we were safe, thank you so much.
Thank you for saving me.
No problem, you're welcome.
You, mate.
That was, yeah, you done well, mate.
I think Ben's a real hero, to be honest. His mum should be proud.
Hats off to Ben. His reaction, his courageousness, what he done is amazing.
I couldn't believe that Ben had done something like that. I mean, not a lot of adults would have acted in that way, let alone 8-year-old boys. Cheers! Cheers!
Yeah, it was really good to see them both again. To see Lauren well and see Ben smiling rather than crying. It was good.
Almost a year on, Ben's bond with his mum is even stronger.
I just wasn't thinking about anything else except from her. Now I think we have a bigger relationship with each other.